Midoriya knew Mao had taken the bait the second Mao's left hand started to move. Mao's hand had a bad habit of whipping through the air, meaning it didn't directly go straight to the opponent. Like a whip it moved in a beeline towards its target, moving in an arc instead of a straight line. But they were still fast. Mao had a habit of putting a lot of weight behind his jabs, which was why Midoriya had been getting knocked around like a tennis ball. That weight gave the jab some extra power, yes, but it was also exactly what Revenant wanted right now. There were many types of attacks but not all of them banked on direct power. Hell, one style used the opponent's weight and momentum against them, but up till now Mao had been too grounded and too fast for it to work. When Mao gave those up by moving himself and being predictable, though. Revenant opened both hands and planted his feet just a moment before Mao's jab landed, spinning his body to narrowly avoid the crushing force of the punch while his grabbing the main man with a grip like a vice. Revenant's right grabbed Mao's wrist and pulled it forward while his left grabbed Mao by his coat, suddenly pulling back with all his might to lift and throw the giant. Mao's weight and size, which usually would have stopped this, now helped Revenant as Mao was leaning too far forward. He had banked too much on the jab, and now he was paying for it. For once it was Mao who flew through the air as Revenant pushed the bodysuit to its limits, lifting the giant off the ground before slamming him into the ground. Revenant didn't take time to enjoy this victory and instead capitalized off it, taking a single step back before hitting Mao in the side below his ribs with a sharp kick. The power of the kick with Mao's compromised position left Mao the one to roll back from that exchange, rolling a few feet back while Revenant built distance. Mao didn't stay down long, though. He was laughing the entire time and took the kick with ease, rolling once before he used the momentum to flip onto his feet. Even after all that, after all of those attacks, Mao was unfazed. Hell, he looked more excited than before. The point of this fight wasn't for Midoriya to win though, that was damn near impossible. Every time Midoriya had beaten Mao before he had to use something to get over Mao's ludicrous durability, and this was a fistfight. The fact that he shouldn't try to hurt Mao because it was just a spar was irrelevant, he just couldn't hurt the main man. That's why he wasn't fighting to win, directly at least. His goal was to show off as much as he could do, and that meant he couldn't give up until he had at least tried everything. Sure, he could have just told Mao what he could do in the training he had. But that wasn't how he did things. Words didn't have quite the punctuality as action. What was that? Wrestlin'. Mao took a stab at Midoriya's style while he kept his eyes fixated on his opponent. Despite how scatterbrained he usually sounded, Mao had some incredible focus when it came to fighting. Judo. Midoriya kept his legs slightly bent, shifting his position slowly while Mao moved. He didn't see any openings he liked yet, so there was no reason to rush in. Really? Mao blinked in surprise, then scratched his head. I thought judo had pins. The moment Mao moved to scratch his head, Midoriya rushed. One of Mao's hands would be out of the way so Midoriya could go straight for the body again. Mao had scratched his head with his right hand so that's the angle Midoriya approached from. Midoriya covered the distance before Mao could even finish speaking, going in for another kick. He couldn't do the spinning back kick, that took too long, so he'd instead go with the front kick again. That was his fastest kick. Mao seemed to move in slow motion as Revenant came in for the kick, his left hand moving just a little too slow as he tried to punch the nimble vigilante. Revenant rushed past Mao and kicked the giant on the way past, pushing off the giant and entirely avoiding Mao's punch. Revenant didn't stop with just one kick though. He was past Mao now and spun around to face the larger man again. Now, he had enough time in the distance. Now, Revenant raised one of his legs as he spun, bringing his knee up to his chest to build power before he shot Mao in the side with a spinning back kick. The kick shot Mao in the stomach, the fifth attack to hit that spot. His precision was on point today. But before Midoriya could retract his leg and pull back, a large hand clamped down around his shin and held him tight like a vice. Pins like this. Mao then moved forward. His right hand kept its firm grip on Midoriya's leg as he pushed against Midoriya, toppling the already off-balance vigilante and putting Midoriya on his ass. Then, to cement his victory, Mao continued to move in and forced Midoriya's leg against his body. Mao's left hand slammed down over Midoriya's right arm, pinning it while Mao's right hand forced Midoriya's left leg to almost touch his left shoulder. Midoriya's right arm, the one Mao grabbed, was pinned under Mao's body weight. Midoriya's left leg was at risk of hyperextending and also kept him from using his left arm. He was stuck. I think that's the first time I've ever actually been pinned. I didn't know I could stretch like that. Midoriya was now working his very sore left leg, leaning against a building while he swung it back and forth. For real? Mao looked surprised, then shrugged it off as he opened a water bottle. Man, maybe I should have been a hero. I'd kick ass. The paperwork. Fuck being a hero. Mao drained the water bottle and crushed the plastic, tossing it into his own training bag while continuing to talk. But that sheet ain't what we here for. So, first things first, how ya feeling? Pain, mostly in my hips, entirely in my hips, Midoriya responded instantly. He had given up the second Mao landed that last pin. He didn't have the muscle to throw Mao off or the finesse to slip out. No point in trying to change the impossible. Other than that, though, I'm fine. This suit's pretty good for stuff like that. Damn right that thing is. Mao held up another water bottle and, once Midoriya nodded, lobbed it at Midoriya's head and chuckled when it bounced off the green mess of hair. What kind of metal's dat? Wait, we're getting off topic. Speak for yourself, world's worst pitcher. Midoriya rolled his eyes as he picked up the water bottle and sat against the building, glad to be in the shade. The bodysuit naturally pulled in heat, cooling the body, but it was still hot as fuck and it wasn't even the heat of the day yet. Lucky him. You were da one who couldn't catch I'm doing it again. Mao shook his head, snickering before he focused and got a little more serious. So, ya got problems. Whatever, but do ya know da big one I see? Yeah, my martial arts are sloppy. Midoriya wasn't stupid enough to think his performance was great, reviewing his performance throughout the two quick matches. He barely knew any real martial arts and he was pretty sure the second Mao started to use any moves more complicated than basic punch or basic kick was the second he lost. His martial arts were still sloppy, but Mao could definitely improve that. Nope, Mao laughed, cutting off Midoriya's rambling before it could really get underway with a laugh. He shook his head, smiling wide as he spoke. Sure, ya moves are kinda bad. Sloppy's a great word for it, but ya moves. Solid fine, maybe even alright. Not great, but that's not the big problem. What? Midoriya blinked up at him, a little confused. Mao continued on without even flinching in the face of Midoriya's confusion. Ya tech's tight as fuck, Senpiter. Mao gestured to Midoriya, specifically to the bodysuit this time. He seemed to be going through each of Midoriya's qualities to narrow down what he thought Midoriya's biggest problem was. Dat sword ya made, dem guns, ya really good at making sheet. So the problem is, Midoriya was trying to follow along as he drank the water. He had been trying to predict where this conversation was going and failed again, so now he was just content to listen. Mao didn't think the problem was his martial arts like he thought. They both knew and admitted that his items were good, and Midoriya would go so far as to say the suit was the best part of Ronin. But what did that leave? If it wasn't his technique or his technology, what was his big problem? It's simple, ya dipshit. Mao laughed, then leaned in. Ya big problem is you. What? Chapter end notes. Yo, another chapter coming at Cha like Cleopatra, backed by my sleep deficiency and Dr. Pepper. I'm sponsored again, I'm not thinking again, and everything's just sort of happening. Now all that's left is for me to write an entire chapter during the class and we'll have come full circle. This chapter was one long fun fight, and boy was it messy to write. When writing a fight scene I focus on writing the actions I want first then make it legible later, so that the end product has been designed to be a hard fight but tailored to make sense. But I've never actually succeeded in making this mess make sense, so take it with a grain of salt. It wasn't high action so you didn't get to see all the details of their respective fighting styles, but I tried to put both of their personalities in their fighting styles. Mao has a guard just so he's in position for his favorite attacks but never defends and instead just takes hits. Midoriya is in constant motion and constantly trying to play it safe. We'll see more of their respective styles later. Still, hope I've dropped enough hints about Midoriya's current big problem according to me. Not sure if it makes sense or if anyone else will agree, but hey. Can't have a good discussion if we all agree. Now, time for me to bail. Adios. Chapter 168. Chapter Summary. 168 chapters in, still unsure what to put here. I've learned so much. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Two figures stood in the summer heat, one completely confused and the other just as confident. The confident one spoke loud and clear, his physical size the only thing that could outdo his bravado as he spoke. It's simple, dipshit. The main man leaned forward as he spoke, gesturing to the vigilante with his hand to show what he meant. Ya big problem is you. Midoriya looked up off the ground, tilting his head he tried to process what on earth Mao was talking about. Maybe the heat was cooking his brain, but, what? Midoriya blinked in confusion, trying to piece together what Mao was talking about while the main man just leaned back and laughed. Are you gonna elaborate on that or? Midoriya took another drink from his water bottle, shaking his head as he gave up trying to figure out what Mao was thinking. Mao's mind was a rabbit hole he really didn't want to get sucked into. Elaborate? Fuck no. Who ya think I am, ya maths teacher? Mao laughed even harder at the thought, then shook his head. Why talk when I can show? Mao, showing me would still be elaborating. Shut up and observe. Mao dove straight into his not elaborating elaboration, getting Midoriya back on his feet for the demonstration. Hands up, guard up. Another fight. Midoriya didn't sound weary as he assumed a fighting stance. He was sore and a little tired, but he could push past those easy enough. Still, his question was kind of stupid. Of course Mao would choose to explain things through a fight, fighting was basically Mao's whole shtick. Midoriya squared up, eyes trained and ears tuned to the main man while Mao stood tall, confident. And completely defenseless. Mao didn't even try to guard, keeping both hands on his hips as he looked over the young vigilante. He towered over Midoriya in both size and confidence, his smug mug going beyond its usual levels of confidence as he laughed. So, nah waitin'. Mao heartily laughed, pointing his head to the skies before he leaned forward, bearing a vicious smile. I'ma punch ya in the dome. What? Midoriya wasn't stupid enough to question if Mao would actually do it, but he was confused how punching him in the face was going to help him get stronger. Dodge. Mao moved in the same moment he spoke. 1 second he was standing 10 feet away with no guard, beaming with confidence, then the next. Mao's lead foot slammed down as the main man drove his body forward, pushing off his back foot for extra speed and strength. Legs slammed into the ground, shoulders pivoted over hips, and an arm like a battering ram shot through the air straight at Senpai's skull with enough force to break concrete. Revenant moved in the same instant, shifting his legs and body. His body shifted downward, gliding cleanly out of the way of Mao's punch well before the attack even got close. Mao's punch was easy to see coming, another huge swing. All he had to do was move 3 or 4 feet to the right and he was safe. Mao suddenly locked his legs and hips, ending his pivot early and staring Senpai head on. Now the vigilante was back in Mao's firing line, stuck mid-dodge. Mao roared as he adjusted his legs, turning his huge haymaker into a precise punch still aimed at Senpai's face. Revenant saw it coming the moment Mao switched up his legwork. He could tell where the punch was going to hit, he could see the direct line to his face. His body was falling into position, Revenant was literally putting himself in harm's way. But he couldn't stop it. He tensed his muscles, trying to pull back and change directions. He took all the strength out of his legs to try and fall underneath the punch, tried to raise his arms, but his body was just too slow. Oh. Boom. Wake up, wake up, wake up, there ya are. The world slowly faded back in like a camera finding focus. The left side of Midoriya's face felt hot and a little swollen despite the safety gear strapped to him. Damn, he got fucking nailed. Midoriya blinked as he leaned up, trying to figure out what just happened. He was on the ground, lying in a pile of torn grass and dirt, a ditch carved by his own bad landing. There was a visible path of torn grass in front of him, probably caused by his own body rolling along after Mao decked him in the face. Midoriya stopped trying to look around and squinted, feeling another flash of pain across his face. Definitely had a black eye now. How ya feelin' Senpai? Mao was squatting over him, poking him with a nice cold water bottle like a child with a stick poking a weird bug. Well, my hip is no longer my biggest worry. That's a start. Midoriya could barely notice how sore his hip was now as he raised his hands and started to unbuckle the protective headgear, fumbling with the straps for a few seconds before weakly lobbing it to the side and grabbing the water bottle. How long was I out? Like, 3 seconds. Ya big baby. Mao shook his head before helping Midoriya to his feet. So dramatic, says the guy who wanted to punch me in the face. Mao shrugged, not too bothered. I warned ya. Not ma fault ya dumbass just can't dodge. And, in their joking, Mao redirected it to the central problem. Midoriya wiped the grass off his pants and bodysuit while thinking through what might have been the shortest fight of his entire career. He saw the punch coming and reacted, getting in position to dodge. Then, halfway through, the punch switched. Mao hadn't used a feint. Mao probably didn't even know what a feint was if Mao thought punches like those were for training. Mao had changed his punch halfway through on a whim now. Mao changed his punch because the main man knew it wouldn't hit. They both did. But while they both knew it, only one of them had been able to react in time to adjust. Mao acted, Revenant reacted. Mao adjusted, but that was when Revenant fell short. Reaction speed? Maybe. Revenant thought it over, chewing on what exactly failed. Mentally both of them were on the same level, but physically Mao had pulled ahead. Ah, physically. No, my body. Midoriya unlatched and unzipped the bodysuit, exposing the top half of his body as he pulled it off for a quick self-examination. Midoriya had very little fat, sure, but he didn't have much muscle either. His body was still sore, recovering from its previous injuries as always, but for the first time in his vigilante career, he couldn't just ignore the protests of his body. He was tired. He was sore. He was hungry. All in all, Izuku Midoriya was out of shape. Most of the time he could use the bodysuit to put himself at the same point as people with strength or speed-enhancing quirks, but he himself was a lot weaker than them. It hadn't been a problem before, but now it was starting to catch up to him. He had little muscle mass and was pretty weak. His strength was negligible at best, almost entirely because he never needed it. Yamato cut through everything effortlessly, kindness and Cupid had barely any kickback, and the bodysuit basically gave him superhuman strength. Why would he need to improve something he didn't use? The problem was that he did use it, and he had reached a point where his weakness was starting to show. Someone with a better physique could use the bodysuit alone to achieve much better things than he accomplished so far, not even counting the guns or Yamato. The suit enhanced his strength and speed, sure, but he had to provide the reflexes to make it move and his reflexes weren't much. Midoriya had only focused on technique and form, but he was starting to reach a point where his form was good enough. Could it get better? Sure. Could his technology be more refined? Again, sure, but one part of this trinity was holding the other two back, and it always would if he didn't start to fix it. My biggest weakness right now is my body. Yup. Mao laughed as Midoriya figured it out, kicking the protective helmet that Midoriya had thrown into the air like a soccer ball and messing around, keeping it midair with just short sharp kicks. Glad ya figured it out so quick. Damn, I'm a good teacher. And you thought the best way to tell me that was by saying your big weakness is you. And punching ya in da face. Don't forget punching ya in da face. Midoriya shook his head at the main man, pressing the cold water bottle against his face for a little respite as he zipped the bodysuit back up and moved into the shade. He was honestly impressed by how unflappable Mao was in the face, being able to say all that with a straight face. Well, thanks for setting me straight. Glad to help man. Mao gave him an enthusiastic pat on the back, laughing as he outdid himself once again. The quirk hype made Mao immune to a lot of things, and it seemed shame and sarcasm were somewhere on that long list. But Mao seemed to have had his fill of fun as he refocused, still smiling but speaking with a little more sincerity. Now ya know what's holding ya back, ya can really let loose and improve. Can't beat what ya don't know. Midoriya shook his head, trying to seem neutral despite the small smile on his face. As painful as this had been, this was a big help. Midoriya didn't know everything, but he did know himself pretty well and was almost sure that he would have doubled down on training if Mao hadn't come in and helped. He probably would have done what most anime characters did, training non-stop to improve. Trying even harder to master new techniques, refining the moves he already had, updating his equipment. All good in their own right, but maybe it was time for a break. He tried getting back into his old rhythm, but only now did he realize that his old rhythm might not have been that good. Now was time to adjust the course, to slow things down, and think things through. His old plan was good, but it had been running him ragged. Midoriya was smart enough to know when he was pushing his luck, and he was quite content to not push it any further. It was time to fix some of his problems before he tried to go out and fix other people's. He had been good, but he could have been great. And Revenant didn't settle for second best. Thanks for the help, Mao. Really, you were a huge help. Midoriya stretched his legs and hips again, thinking through his new plan. Rest came first. Maybe a visit to a doctor to figure out a health plan, or a fitness. Something, whatever those gym people were called to work on a personal plan to get him in top shape. Course Sendy. Mao gave the vigilante another large pat on the back before going over to his bike and bag, rummaging through his things. Now. Midoriya took a deep breath. His plan was still in the early stages. It'd need a few dozen rewrites before it'd be anything decent. He'd need to check around for trainer stats what those gym people were. Trainers. Before he could really settle on one. Flexible hours, preferably with some fighting experience so he could learn some more martial arts. Someone who wouldn't question what he was doing. Midoriya's tangent was cut off as a cold water bottle was pressed against the nape of his neck, making him jump a mile high as he scrambled to look back. Mao smirked down at him before dropping the water bottle into his hands. Ya know, these things are water bottles, not ice packs. Hurry up and drink. We got a lot of work to do. I know, wait. Midoriya froze, glancing over at the main man with more confusion before the pieces started to fall in place in his head. Man, he either had a concussion or the heat really did cook his brain. Yup, Mao picked up his motorcycle and moved it into a building, out of sight, then locked the building up after him. Wah, ya dumbass think I wasn't gonna train ya. Yup, dumbass tilde. Yup. Mao only laughed harder, but it was a quick laugh this time. Whatever, hurry up Sendy, I already said we got work to do, and I'm too lazy to repeat sheet. Midoriya opened one of the water bottles, pouring it over his head before drinking the second quickly, tossing both empty bottles into his bag. Mao walked over to the main building, the one with the bunker hidden underneath it, and fiddled with the keys for a minute before opening the door and stepping clear, dramatically gesturing for Midoriya to go through. Midoriya shook his head like he was annoyed, but he couldn't hide a small smile as he picked up his bag and went into the building ahead of Mao and descended into the dark twisting pathways that didn't seem that dark anymore, not after all the things he'd been through. He wasn't sure what was ahead, but with Mao, he knew there wouldn't be a boring moment. Chapter end notes. Yay, I'm not dead yet. I'll try to keep the non-fanfic stuff short, but this is the development of the fanfic so it's technically part of the fanfic. Whatever. Let's keep it snappy. Had to move someone in 40-degree weather and rain. Got sick. 2 papers, 3 tests, and 1 speech to write. I'll get time crunch because sick. Finish that, then write a chapter for my other fanfic. 2 more tests and have to give the speech. Here we are. Fun times. I don't like complaining so I just wanted an update of where I was. I didn't get the Rona, I'm too lame for something like that, just got a normal cold. Bummer. Didn't even get to miss school cause I take almost all online classes. Double bummer. But this shit show. A lot of people figured out what Mao was talking about last chapter judging by the comments, and if you didn't, just post it in the comments. I'm trying to get better at responding to comments again. Anyways, next up we've got the start of a training montage. If I believed in montages and didn't think showing all of Midoriya's suffering was funny. In addition, we're gonna take a step back and show some stuff going on in the world of Ronin outside of Midoriya, like the Japanese Hero Association and UA dealing with the wrap-up of AFOVS OFA, which just happened 1 week ago in the lore. That's about it. Next chapter will come out faster than this with Thanksgiving around the corner and me being as social as a landmine. Till next time, adios. Chapter 169. Chapter Summary. 100 and nice. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya's breathing was forced and ragged. His arms burned and his body felt like garbage. He was reaching his limits. Still, the physical pain was nothing compared to the shame. The little pride he had didn't let him stop there, and so he forced his arms under him once again and slowly rose again. Then slowly descended, and slowly rose. 32, 33, yeah good man. Mao stood over Midoriya as the vigilante did push-ups, glancing over his can of juice at the struggling youth. I'm fine. Midoriya spoke through gritted teeth as he rose again, his entire body shaking. He already surpassed his record in middle school, but even he knew this still wasn't a great score. Yeah sure. Mao tilted his head as he looked over Midoriya. This is, like, the easiest workout ever. Nothing simpler than push-ups. Planking. Point taken, but y'd be even worse at planks than this. Mao slurped again from his can of juice, daring Midoriya to prove him wrong, but the boy couldn't. God, he was tired. Midoriya finally gave up and crashed to the cold dirt floor of the gun range, taking a second just to breath. How many? 26 good ones, 5 sheet ones, and I didn't bother counting 8 of them. Damn. Damn indeed. Mao took another drink from his can before shaking it, looking down in disappointment at the now empty can. Double damn. But seriously, ya can't even do 30 good push-ups and you done number 3 criminal in Japan. And y'ave kicked how many people's asses? Mao laughed as he crushed the can. This sheet's hilarious. 26 good push-ups. That was a pretty small number to start with, but that gave him a lot of room to grow. Once he could get off the floor. Yeah, what's next? Midoriya settled for flopping his head over to look at Mao while Mao pulled out the tablet he used as a phone, marking something on it. Push-ups. Midoriya adjusted his view to check Mao's expression, but the main man seemed serious. Really? Really? Mao put away his phone, and got onto the ground, demonstrating. This time you're gonna do wide push-ups. Hands real far apart. See? What's this method called? Workout torture. Midoriya let his head drop to the ground as he continued to breathe heavily. He felt exhausted already and all they had done so far was run in circles then do push-ups. The running had started fine. Midoriya ran every day, but he didn't run for 30 minutes straight like Mao did. Still, he held on till the end of the running and got to the next part. Push-up hell. Fuck if I know man, I learned this sheet 70 years ago. Think I pay attention to sheet-like names. Mao laughed as he performed a single push-up with so much strength he pushed his entire body off the floor and into a standing position. Ya got 20 seconds till ya go again. Breathe. What do I do after that? Midoriya stretched his arms out on the ground, giving Mao one last glance before he dived back into push-up hell. Mao returned the glance, his signature smile returning as he laughed. At our rate ya going? Die. 10 seconds. Spread those arms Centipiter, we're gonna have fun. Most of the nomus we captured are the same as before. Exclude the abnormal. Yes sir. The nomus we captured don't have human reactions and we're unlikely to acquire new information from them. The official from the Hero Association changed the presentation behind him to a new slide, showing off a devastating scene. Buildings and roads reduced to rubble, practically impossible to tell apart. The warehouse where these nomus were kept was destroyed, so all we can do now is continue to analyze what we have captured and continue our investigation on their manufacturing. Most of the other Hero Association and police figures nodded while one checked the briefing they all had got, his annoyance evident. We haven't gotten more personal information about the people inside the bar either, right? We are currently investigating. Was it so hard to say no? They didn't have any answers. This whole meeting was basically just slowly and painfully admitting they had no clue what happened, and dragging it out just made it worse. Even if we were able to capture most of the nomus, we let all the perpetrators, including Shigaraki, escape. Another official spoke up, cutting to another part of the issue. Even if we grade ourselves lightly we only got away with a draw due to injury. Idiot. Limas, the annoyed police official, shook his head at such an optimistic approach. There were times for optimism and during a risk assessment was not one of them. He glared over at the official that said they had a draw, keeping his chin resting on a hand as he explained how bad this really was. We just gave up the symbol of peace. His eyes flicked across the faces in the room, taking in the confusion. He didn't want to talk unnecessarily, hell, he didn't want to talk at all, but if someone had to explain to these geniuses how fucked they really were, he could step up. All Might's weakened body has been exposed to the world, destroying the image of an undefeatable and untouchable symbol of peace. That fight proved that he is weak, that he is touchable, and worst of all it did all of that on national television. Everyone from the civilians to the villains saw it. He straightened out as he spoke, checking everyone again to make sure his words were sinking in. Hell, even the heroes saw it. Not exactly the message we wanted to send our next generation of heroes. That's what happens when we rely on only one person, Limas's neighbor spoke up, clasping his hands together in frustration. Everyone just realized you can get this far just by gathering a bunch of idiots. Limas built off his neighbor, going further into the structural problems they were going to face soon. From our initial profiling the principal offender, Tamura Shigaraki was even said to throw childish tantrums. Recently, however, his plans have started to become more and more complex. He's been prodding society to find ways to affect it, and by now, he's definitely found a few. His thought process has matured. Every time the League has failed, they've come back even stronger. Limas leaned back in his chair, taking a chance as he thought through a certain villain's final speech to the public and, by proxy, to the villains. And now, with All Might out of the picture, there are fewer checks than ever before on people's actions. All villains will use this chance to expand their sphere of influence. Now, as he took a break from speaking to wet his throat, some of his contemporaries spoke up. Are you saying this was part of the League of Villains' plan? This is the only time Dave has actually won, and even then, it's debatable if they're actually the winners or just another puppet. Their real leader's gone. Isn't that just hindsight? Do you really think this was all planned out? Quote. I don't know. Limas shrugged. He wasn't psychic after all, he was just taking a few guesses based on the evidence before him. Like they all were supposed to. That's what risk assessment did. God, he had such a headache. It's very likely that the man behind the League set this all up, but even then, it's too early to say. But what we do know is that we have too many loose ends right now. But if they were jumping on his ass for being theoretical, he'd stop being theoretical and hit them with some cold hard facts. The League and its backer have slipped our grasp too many times. We must find and capture them. All of them. We police have no time to be sitting around, being called the villain reception. He put down his cup resolutely, focused entirely on the facts. Namely, the obvious fact. Right now, for lack of a better term, Japan was doomed. They couldn't continue like this. Something needs to change. The heroes, this entire system needs to change. Any ideas on how we do that since you're being so positive? Lima scoffed at that. Being positive was just being pretentious at this point, especially with the state their country was in, but if he had to put forward some ideas. We need to destroy our system first. Find our weaknesses and tear them apart. Then, when we're done, we can rebuild up even stronger. A few of the officials laughed or scoffed at this idea. It wouldn't be easy, but at this point, easy solutions would just delay the inevitable. They needed to make some big changes and tough calls if they wanted to change course now. But no one would want to address that. Hell, he didn't want to until he was forced to. Even now the officials shifted away from the problem, instead focusing on something that was in the grand scheme probably insignificant. They had bigger fish to fry, but nobody wanted to get their hands dirty and get burned trying to clean the grill. In other news, we still have yet to identify the figure that interrupted the fight between All Might and Midoriya was finished in almost every conceivable way. He just finished his third set of diamond push-ups with your hands way too close together to be reasonable. He also finished 2 more sets of normal push-ups and those weird wide push-ups. He had finished everything Mao had asked him so far. Also, he was pretty sure Mao was right. He was gonna die. No, wait, he couldn't be dying. Dying was a lot less painful than this, and he was something of an expert on dying. How ya feeling, Centipiter? Not that Mao noticed or cared, loudly interrupting probably with a huge stupid smile on his face. Midoriya wasn't sure, he couldn't tell because he was face down in the dirt, way too tired to flip himself over. MFFMM. Great. Mao gave him a pat on the back before rolling Midoriya over, dropping another water bottle on the dead body. Way to go, Cindy. You're done for today. That sounds good. Midoriya flopped like a dead fish on the ground, spreading his arms and legs out as he breathed heavily. His shirt was a mess of sweat and dirt now, and he felt like he could spend a few hours or days melting in a shower. It sounds too good. What's the catch? Dinner. Mao laughed as he sat down across from the dead body, taking back out his tablet phone. I got some places I wanted trying out, and you've got da budget. Plus, we're gonna fix ya diet. It's a win-win situation. Then why do I feel like I'm still losing? Midoriya groaned as he worked his arms back and forth. Even his legs and core were starting to get sore after so many push-ups, always trying to stay perfectly straight while he went up and down. Cause ya done got that optimism, Cindy. Mao laughed harder, then offered Midoriya a hand up. Don't worry, I can pay for myself. This time. But next time you better give some grub to the main man. Thanks. I might need a minute to leave. Course. Gotta do our stretches after a workout. I'll even help you out with them. Oh no. It was a melancholy scene within the hospital room, a small but private room with only a few people inside. The embers inside of me have finally gone out, Toshinori spoke plainly. These were the hard facts, and there was no changing them. The symbol of peace is dead. However, the fight isn't over. Not yet. Toshinori clenched his fist in frustration. His mortal enemy no, all of Hero Society's mortal enemy was still on the loose, and probably more dangerous than ever. And he couldn't do a damn thing to stop that monster. It's too soon to worry about that, his mentor Gran Torino scolded him. All for one's a problem, yes, but we've got dozens of problems to deal with right now. If his plan really is what he said it was, this is the perfect time to deal with them. All for one said he'd be leaving Japan, Tsukauchi mused, rubbing his chin. He probably means for villain society to grow larger in his absence, but it's also a chance for us to grow and shift. We might never get a better chance to strengthen ourselves. And also we need to address her. There's no point in being on eggshells about it, Tsukauchi. Don't worry. Toshinori gave the detective his best smile, but something still weighed down on him like a wet blanket. It weighed down on all of them, dreary and oppressive, but there was no way around it. I need you to be straight with me, Tsukauchi. How is Nana Shimura? What is the government planning to do with her? Tsukauchi laughed softly, but there wasn't much heart behind it. Well, at least one of those is easy. Shimura is going to be kept in Tartarus, locked up in the same space that we plan to put All for One in. She won't be able to use any quirks and she won't be in contact with anyone, for everyone's safety, including her own. Toshinori nodded, expecting something similar. He didn't like it, but it made sense. If she got loose and started using those quirks again, not many people in Japan could even resist her, let alone stop her. Plus, the most likely person to die from Shimura going on a rampage was Shimura herself if she overused her quirks. I see. And you don't know her condition yet? His tone was optimistic. If Tsukauchi didn't know yet, his hopes wouldn't have been crushed yet. He could still hope for a little longer. But Tsukauchi respected him too much to let false hopes fester. Shimura's condition is stable, but she shows no sign of waking up. Here, the medical papers. Tsukauchi took out a file from the coat hanging off his chair and passed it over silently, creating a moment of silence as Toshinori read it. His face was creased with worry as his eyes flicked across the words quickly, but it soon turned to relief as Tsukauchi started to sort out some of the details. There's no signs of quirk singularity in her, unlike the normal Nomus. Most Nomus had so many quirks jammed into their body that they rapidly aged, the quirks overloading the body and causing bodily functions to fail far earlier than they should have. Shimura, however, didn't have any of these signs. If she makes it through this, she'll be alive for a while. That's not very good though, is it? Gran Torino couldn't help but point out the edge in that statement. If that's true, All for One has found a new way of making Nomus and removed one of their biggest weaknesses. Not exactly. He just replaced it. Tsukauchi leaned over All Might, flipping the papers and tapping a paragraph. Shimura's showing heavy signs of exhaustion and hunger. It seems whatever All for One did to change Shimura makes her take a lot more energy than the other Nomus. Toshinori finished reading through it, his expression mixed. She would survive, yes, but it was uncertain if she would live. While the file did confirm that this was Shimura's body, no one could tell what happened to her mind. It was taxing, but once again, he could do nothing. Mirio would have to finish his battle against All for One, but who could help Nana Shimura? Toshinori clenched his fists a little harder, crumpling the file in his moment of anger and weakness. If only he'd been stronger, if only he helped his master defeat All for One back then, if only. Sukauchi could see the pit his friend was getting himself into and decided it'd be best to get off this line of thinking. Hey, did you notice the damage report? Other than her eye, they say Shimura will likely make a full recovery within 3 months. He tried to lighten the mood with a joke, gesturing to one of the lines on the medical report. Most of the damage is actually to her ears. Someone was really trigger happy with all those flashbangs. HMPH, yes. Do you have any idea who the hero was? Sukauchi? Gran Torino usually didn't care about things like this, but even he didn't like talking about what had happened to Shimura, and he could see that Toshinori wasn't going in a good headspace. Best to get him out of that space as quickly as possible. Besides, this topic was a big one among the upper heroes. The wild card who appeared when almost all hope seemed gone, like the strangers in a Wild West flick, appearing without ceremony or name and only leaving when the job was over. With all the guns and explosives, he looked to either be American or unhinged. This did take Toshinori out of the medical papers for a moment. He had been wondering about the strange hero who wandered in at the 11th hour during his battle with Shimura and all for one. A small man, insulting and attacking everything in sight, but with a raw and hot brand of heroism that seemed almost untamed. He fought without regard for his own life, his position, or anyone else. He'd insult both All Might and Shimura one moment, then take a hit that would certainly kill most people just to get a chance to win the next. Then, when it was clear he was beaten and done, he'd refuse to stay down and drag himself back up. That kind of heroism spoke to Toshinori, and he couldn't help but imagine if he met this man a little earlier. The problem was he didn't have a clue who this man actually was, or if that man was even still alive. We've got no confirmation on his identity yet. He wasn't a hero from Japan at least, and we haven't found an American hero who matches his description and is missing. He didn't have any ID on him. Toshinori was surprised. Most heroes carried business cards for themselves, but even past that, no licenses like his hero license or driver's license. Was this guy really a hero? He didn't even have a wallet or phone on him, just a lot of bullets. Sukauchi checked a different report on his phone, scanning the little information they had on the mystery man. In addition, there's more on this nutcase. Gran Torino had cemented his profile of the guy. Hero or not, anyone who charged all for one with just a bunch of bullets and a broken sword had a few screws loose. No, there's less. He disappeared 12 minutes after the fight, or at least, the record ends. We couldn't even figure out what he looks like under his mask. He couldn't have done that on his own. His injuries were real. Toshinori squinted, a touch confused. There was no way this person could have woken up after only 12 minutes. Even a regeneration quirk took energy, and would probably keep the stranger unconscious for longer as it healed his injuries. That meant, this smells of meddling. Someone changed that record. Gran Torino cut straight to the heart of the issue since everyone there knew damn well what this meant. Someone was covering for their mystery man, and the odds were good that someone knew who the mystery man really was. If they could find who changed the records. Toshinori looked from his mentor to his friend. Sukauchi, do you know who last changed the record? Sukauchi nodded, but he was a little hesitant to answer. Are you sure you want to know right now? You've got a lot on your plate already. We're not getting any younger, Sukauchi, and we all want to know the answer. Gran Torino cut in. His injuries hurt and he wanted to go lie down, but he had the feeling he wouldn't be getting any easy sleep until he got some answers. Judging by that look on your face, you don't know who this nutjob is either, so just spit out whoever's covering it up already. Well, we don't have any information that he's covering it up, just that the record ends there. Sukauchi looked up, seeing that neither of his listeners were buying his story. Alright, but there's not enough for an investigation, especially with all the stuff going on. Nobody up top seems to care about this guy, so I can't really do anything else. Get on with it already. Sukauchi stopped talking and just flipped his phone over to show the record. Specifically, it showed the last person to edit the document. It was only 3 words and 2 letters long. No last name, just his first name and position. Well, I should have expected that. Gran Torino just scoffed after reading it. This raises some questions. A lot of questions, actually. Toshinori squinted at the name to make sure he read it right, but there was no doubt who it was. The title alone made that pretty clear. Toshinori intended to write the name down or record it in some way, but this name was so familiar to him that it'd be unnecessary. He read the name one last time before handing Sukauchi back his phone. Quote ... I think I've got some questions for him next conference. Of course, with a little reflection, it was pretty obvious who it was. There had been one person who arrived right as the fight ended despite not needing to be there, who had seemed to disappear for a few minutes while the medics assessed his injuries, then vanished once the stranger was taken away to the hospital. Nezu, principal of UA. Midoriya had been a student, a vigilante, and as of today a piece of dough. He slumped back in the chair after Mao finished treating him like a piece of toffee and bending him in every direction imaginable, plus a few more just because he could. I didn't even know I could get my legs that high. Well, y'all learn something every day. Y'all pretty flexible centipeder. Mao laughed as he finished his own stretches, moving his body with a grace and an efficiency that normally seemed entirely totally alien to the giant. Keep it up and you'll be way more flexible than me in no time flat. So is this what we're gonna do every day? No martial arts, just push-ups and stretching. Midoriya rubbed his legs as he spoke. He really had outdone himself in the stretching department at least. He was pretty sure it was because he did static stretches every night, but it was clear he could still go a little further with even those. And running, but only every other day. Gotta rest, ya know. Mao once again outlined the flaw in Midoriya's thinking. Midoriya was so used to training and grinding that he forgot he was supposed to slow down and thought that this was going to be an everyday thing. Of course it wouldn't though, not at this training intensity. So that's why you use this training method. High intensity one day followed by an off day for relaxation and adjustment. It made more sense in his head, even if he was annoyed with himself for how little was considered high intensity. With his bodysuit he could have done all of this for hours practically, but that really just showed how much he'd come to rely on it. Exactly. Mao pointed at Midoriya with confidence as the vigilante hit the nail on the head. Plus, this is the best method for quick gains that I know. Right up ya alley, Sendi. You thought me dying over and over again was the best method for getting me in shape. Yup. You know me so well. Midoriya groaned as he massaged his legs, feeling some still tense muscles. Sure, he was still sore all over, but it didn't feel as bad anymore. It was a lot better than the pain he usually went through at least. But we can do some of that fancy martial artsy shit later. Mao moved his arms in large circles as he rose to his full height. Ya do need some help, but one step at a time. Mao now did his own version of relaxing, getting ready for a fight. His motions were as fast and precise as ever, but Midoriya couldn't really appreciate just how good Mao was before. His kicks cut through the air naturally, showing off the experience and training he'd put in over the years. It was weird for Midoriya to watch. He'd seen thousands of heroes fight and been in hundreds himself, but he could confidently say that Mao was one of the strongest people he knew. It was so weird because Mao wasn't that big. Mao didn't lead an organization like that Shigaraki guy and the League of he couldn't remember, and for the example, it didn't matter. Mao wasn't some international supervillain. Mao wasn't even in the top 50 villains in Japan or even Musudafu. Mao was probably one of the strongest people in Japan, now that All for One and All Might were gone, but according to the Hero Association and the villain boards, he was a complete nobody. A ghost, completely off the whole world's radar. How the hell did I ever beat you? Midoriya mumbled to himself, just now taking into scope how lucky he'd been. The first major fight of his life had been against Mao, and only with hindsight could he really appreciate just how far he'd gotten himself in over his head. That's easy, dipshit. Mao glanced over, assuming a guarded stance. The way he controlled his center of gravity, moved his limbs, it all came together to show where that boundless confidence came from. He was good at fighting, plain and simple. Now Mao turned his head forward again, smiling with some teeth as he addressed the question Midoriya didn't even mean to ask. Ya cheated. Midoriya blinked, taken back a little. He was surprised Mao even heard him, but then again, Mao was constantly surprising him, so it only half counted. Still, Mao continued to elaborate on Midoriya's first fight. We had a good fashioned brawl. Sword against fist. Da rules were so clear-cut and simple, even an idiot could get him. Mao laughed as he performed more advanced kicks, his legs swinging with the same speed and precision Revenant swung his swords. It was clear from Mao's tone that he wasn't angry about this defeat, but it seemed to excite him even more. Once again, not that surprising since it was Mao. Dan, ya sword broke, and I had ya ass dead to rights. I was gonna tear you in half. Mao's grin grew more vivid as Midoriya became a little more aware that Mao definitely killed a few people over the years. The main man worked for All for One after all, the greatest criminal in the world, and Mao had a particular set of skills. Even weirder was how close Midoriya had almost ended up on that list, and how he in turn almost killed Mao a couple of times. Man, now that he thought about it, they had a really weird relationship. Oh, Mao was still talking. He should stop zoning out to Mumble City. And then ya cheated. Midoriya's focus returned right at the important part as Mao's smile grew into full-on laughter. It was a fist fight, but ya threw me out a fucking window then whipped out the heat and shot me. Dick move, by the way. 4 shots. What a bitch. They both chuckled a little at the memory before Mao continued. But that's your specialty. I'ma be honest with ya, chief. Ya ready? Sure. Midoriya shrugged as he grabbed his 6th water bottle, wondering just how many of these things Mao had brought before getting back on topic. Ya kinda sheet in a straight fight. Mao kept it as straightforward as his martial arts, now practicing the simple kicks and strikes. That fight upstairs, 20 minutes ago. Dude, ya could be a soccer ball with how easy you are to kick around. Is this revenge for bringing up that time I beat you, or is this some kind of weird lesson? Little about quote both. I'm feeling petty. Mao chuckled as he planted his feet and got into hand strikes. But as bad as ya are in a straight fight, ya great at cheatin'. Hell, ya might be the best cheat I ever met. Quote. I think that's a compliment. Damn right it is. Mao chuckled a little harder as he mixed an explosive kick into his punches without warning. Last time we fought you threw water in my eyes just for a little edge. No hesitation, talkin' everything ya can to get the advantage. I can respect that. Mao was clearly getting more excited as he put more force behind his motions. Every strike from Mao could create a small breeze now as the giant eased off control and instead started to emphasize power. Shootin' me, hittin' me and da face with water. Plus. Mao shifted to lock eyes with Midoriya, a mischievous glimmer in his eye. All those flashbangs back when you're fighting against da boss. Throwing a knife then pulling a gun on da #1 villain. Alright, but that last stuff was more stupid than cheating. Midoriya definitely wouldn't have called anything he did that night very smart. Taking on the strange female Nomu basically on his own, eating a punch from that Nomu just to give All Might a chance of taking it down. Holy shit, did he ever actually win a fight fairly? Midoriya took this second to reflect and think if he ever did win an important fight on his own. Sure, he could take down mooks easy enough on his own, but the big things. Stain, Maruko, Eraserhead and Midnight Wow. Just, wow. Ya didn't notice. Mao laughed even harder now, having to finally stop his martial arts as he doubled over. Holy shit, ya so dumb. Holy shit man, ya finally killed me. Midoriya shook his head at Mao's theatrics, but he couldn't help smirking. If you thought I knew all this, does that mean you thought you were telling me a bunch of stuff I already knew? Why would you tell someone stuff they already know? To fuck with ya. I thought ya were so tired ya just let me say whatever, but this is way funnier. Damn, Mao wiped something out of his eye as he straightened out, still chuckling. God, being with ya is a riot. Thanks. Midoriya wasn't quite sure if he was being sarcastic or not, but once again, Mao had helped set him straight. That was the benefit of being so simple though, Mao didn't bother to overcomplicate everything. It was like being around a living reality check. Glad to help. Not that Midoriya would ever directly admit it willingly. Mao was too smug for that to ever happen, but Mao didn't care. Mao just went back into his martial arts, flexing his skill casually with that ever-present smile. It was a memorizing sight, watching the main man weave through the air like a dancer, the only sound his strikes splitting the air. Midoriya leaned forward, his breath mostly caught after this long break. He was now thinking through the future again, and his eyes were fixed ahead both literally and figuratively as that big overly complicated brain of his worked its magic and came up with one more overly complicated idea. Hey, Mao. Yup. Mao didn't lose pace at all as he spun through the air, whipping his legs around in a semicircle for the spinning back kick, then immediately pivoting back to flow into side kick. Midoriya took a slow sip from the water bottle as he worked the idea out in his head. A spare mask to cover the face. A few extra hideouts he never got around to back in the day. This could really work. Do you think fighting is fun? That has got to be the dumbest thing you've said all day, Mao chuckled, glancing over mid-combination before something broke his concentration. Midoriya looked to be even more focused than Mao had been so far, and that usually meant someone was going to have a very, very bad time very soon. He could adjust the mask quickly enough, and he didn't have to bring the bodysuit. He could focus on using physical attacks again, leaving the weapons at home. No, he'd check with Mao first. Hey, Mao. Revenant slowly looked up with a strange, sadistic smile on his face as the plan slowly came together. I've got a great idea for how I can pay you back. Mao stopped completely and gave his full attention to the #3 villain in Japan. Duh, look in your eyes makes me scared, but that tone of your voice makes me intrigued. Revenant leaned forward, his vicious smile growing. Wanna have a little fun? Several hours later and the sun was setting. Several hours later and the red light district was all lit up and ready to go. Several hours later and two cloaked figures roamed the streets, moving among the masses like a pair of sharks swimming through the sea. That the place. The larger one didn't point, just glanced at where he was talking. Didn't matter though, it understood him. It's around back, in the alley. One entrance, one exit. It spoke back calmly, not bothering to even look at where it was talking. Don't rush. Scan the crowd for any lookouts. Save the excitement now, then. I getcha, I getcha. The larger moved slowly behind the smaller, eyes passing over heroes who seemed to purposely ignore the literal and figurative filth around them. Think they're dull lookouts. Probably. Expect external resistance. Maybe some police. Probably some heroes. They had different areas of expertise. It didn't expect them to have the same talents, so this stage of the raid was mostly going to be its job. Besides, this was more a trial run for the future than a real raid. Even it wasn't stupid enough to go on a hunt like it did back in the day. Excited. The larger's excitement was hidden by his mask but still evident in his voice. He had a hard time suppressing because he never did so until now. He felt twitchy. They don't matter. Focus on the main targets. It reminded its large friend softly, keeping him in check and self-aware until they got to the real action. They had a plan and it intended to stick to it. The larger man couldn't help looking at the alley as they passed. He wasn't totally obvious, but this was only his second time doing something like this. His first was when All for One decided that he should never do anything like this again, but here he was. Two guys out front, I can rush em. We'll rush them together, when the time is right. It gently corrected him, still speaking in that quiet eerie tone. It went over the plan one last time for its larger friend, keeping it quick and simple. Just the way he liked it. We both rush the entrance from either side. Then, one goes in and clears it out and the other stays out and stops anyone from getting in. The one going in though needs to make sure to not hit any bystanders, so that takes a little more control while the other can cut loose and just stops everyone from getting close. Questions? Nah fam, nah. Alright, one. The larger man subconsciously nodded as the smaller subtly and gently pulled on his cloak, guiding him slowly towards the mouth of the alleyway. Meet up at that door if things go good, meet up at that OL backquote office building if things go sheet. This time the smaller nodded to agree as it let go of the larger, quickly moving off into the crowd. Only a minute later it appeared at the far end of the alleyway, a dim figure only distinct by its plainness. Absolutely nothing stood out about it. It raised its left hand and waved as if greeting a friend, then began to walk down the alleyway, its right hand clutching his cloak. The larger grinned as he moved to the other side of the alley, raising his own left hand as he moved forward. His right hand grabbed his cloak as he moved, unfastening it and getting ready to throw it off in a heartbeat. Then, a flicker as Oneno, two cloaks were flung to the side, with two indistinct shapes moving rapidly across the alleyway in the blink of an eye. This was going to be fun. The three people outside the gambling hell not two went down in 7 seconds, one thrown headfirst into the wall while the other two were picked up by their necks then slammed headfirst into the ground. The two shapes then nodded to each other before splitting up. He took a deep breath as he faced the door, adjusting the old bandaging covering his shoulders before he knocked on the strangely reinforced door. He knocked loud and clear, hitting it 3 times before stepping back as politely as he could and adjusting his grip on his massive stick, pulling it back to wind up. The door creaked open slightly as a man peered out, squinting and adjusting to the darker view. Wah! His leg arched up and smashed into the door frame, busting the door wide open and sending the first Yakuza crashing to the ground with the force. A second Yakuza entered his line of sight as he stepped into the room, rushing forward while pivoting his body to build up momentum before slamming the body of the studded stick into the man's stomach, doubling him over. He took a step into the room after that hit, calmly grabbing the second Yakuza by his head and quickly slamming the Yakuza's skull into his knee then throwing the punk to the side like a discarded doll. He punted the first man, kicking him in the side of the face and sending him flying as the intruder entered the gambling den, taking his time as he took in the sights. The gambling den was noisy and hot, the air filled with the voices of at least dozens if not scores of people. He could hear both men and women talking loudly in the gambling rooms ahead of him, but he didn't pay them much mind. He wasn't here for civilians with questionable pastimes, and even if he was, this studded stick was rated E for everyone. He barely flinched as he left the entrance and entered the hall properly, the harsh artificial light glinting off his pale skin and eyes. His red mask and white teeth also glinted in the harsh light, smiling at the Yakuzas who were guarding the gambling rooms. His first victims. He shifted the position of his massive stick, feeling the cool touch of the metal studs against his neck as the doors to the gambling rooms opened up and people began to move out, fearing something as weak and small as a hero raid. Some ran past him, but he didn't care about them. He let the swarms of people rush past as he continued to scan the building with hungry eyes. He had no time to deal with some civilians with dirty habits, he was here for the big fish. The Yakuza burst from their rooms and started to line up, their faces turning from anger and annoyance to shock and fear as they looked at the grinning demonic mask. What, was he really that scary? He thought this mask looked kind of cute. It's. The men were reduced to stuttering, pointing at him. Their expressions turned grave as they realized what they were up against, while he just smiled. It had been a while since he let himself go wild. This could be fun. It's Yakuza Hunter. The men took a step back at just the name. Made for a fun laugh, but he wasn't here for a laugh. Well, one laugh couldn't hurt. His snarl grew louder and louder until it turned into a bellowing laugh, filling the building with his primal laugh as he tightened his grip on the studded stick and walked forward, his white hair outlining his demonic face as he strode straight into the fight. Let's dance. Chapter end notes. You didn't think I could do a chapter in one day, you're definitely correct because editing this took forever. What's up me amigos, I'm not dead yet. Fun times. Anyways, let's get into it. I never realized how much work it actually takes to do Mao's voice consistently until now, probably because this chapter has Mao talking tons. Sometimes, for example, his accent has to get dropped otherwise he'd literally be unintelligible. For example, really, should be, Rila, but when put in with a bunch of other slightly mangled words, the whole thing becomes gibberish. Still, it's a fun limitation to have. It gives Mao a discernible accent because it forces me into a different mindset, and it forces me to write in a different way than I talk, which is good. I highly recommend more writers try something like Mao's accent, because while it may be a little time consuming it's certainly fun. This chapter was made in 2 days, and pretty much all of the second day was spent adding in the scenes from canon, the Hero Association plus police and then the All Might part because it just takes so long to implement. I watch the canon scene to refresh it in my head, figure out what direction I want to take it in, then have to watch the scene again to find any canon bits that still fit and copy them into this mess. Definitely my least favorite part. Big sad. But besides the process behind this, I had a great time writing this. We got to see what season 2 of Ronin's gonna mostly be about, tearing season 1 Ronin to pieces and building it back up a lot stronger. This means a lot of self-reflecting and callbacks. Hope it doesn't get too annoying, and hope I can do a much better job with Yakuza Hunter the second time round. Anyways, this was a really long chapter, so I'ma fall into a black hole for the night and consume an entire turkey. Happy Thanksgiving, and now, adios. Chapter 170. Chapter Summary. Yakuza Hunter living up to his name. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. A quiet night, crushed by the rampage of something beyond human. A commotion in the red light district led by a strange monster, more animal than man. A gambling den, torn apart by a rampaging beast. It was beautiful. Yakuza Hunter grabbed the closest Yakuza and stomped on his foot, laughing maniacally as the man yelped in pain and tried to pull back. But the hunter held his prey with an iron grip, his foot anchoring his victim close with nowhere to run or hide. The man struggled before he viciously attacked the hunter, hitting the intruder with a variety of punches and strikes while he struggled backward, but the Yakuza hunter didn't pull back in the face of this offense. Instead, the hunter's laugh grew louder and louder, leaning into the Yakuza's attack and returning each with precision and power. Fist slammed against fist as the hunter crashed into and crushed this prey in seconds, eating every hit before paying it back double. The bandaging covering his arms and shoulders seemed to stretch and retract like a second set of muscles as he grew closer and closer, releasing a constant barrage of punches into his opponent. This first victim struggled, then staggered, finally collapsing under the brunt of what seemed to be an unstoppable onslaught. Even as he fell, the vicious animal continued to land punch after punch on the Yakuza. Only at the last second did Yakuza Hunter shift the crushing weight of his foot off the Yakuza, grabbing him by the shirt and hoisting the lucky Yakuza into the air. Up till now most of the Yakuza were in awe of the hunter, but with the first going down in just a few seconds it sunk in what was about to happen. This wasn't a fight, with each side talking wins and losses or basic things like reason or self-preservation. This was a hunt, and the only winning was to be the last one standing. It was this realization that made the Yakuza all surge forward at once to take on the strange animal in their midst, who was more feral than even some of the mutant animal types in their midst. They charged toward Yakuza Hunter as he lifted his first victim into the air, preparing to try and crush him with numbers. The hunter spun, laughing as he lobbed the unconscious Yakuza into the incoming wave of new prey. He threw the Yakuza with enough force to sweep some of their legs right out from under them, knocking them down like pins before they could even trip. With one move he took care of about half the incoming wave, but there was still more. Which was great. A large hunt was a good hunt, and he always loved a good fight. Yakuza Hunter planted his feet and howled with laughter as the few remaining men swarmed towards him, not budging an inch. He didn't try to dodge as horns, claws, and knives swung at him, only reaching back and grabbing his large stick with both hands. He pulled back slightly, breathing in, then. Ha! His shout covered over all the noise in the gambling house as he stepped forward with power and confidence, drawing the stick across his body in a single motion with enough force to stop a bull dead in its tracks. The studded stick swung sideways and crashed into the first man's ribs, lifting him entirely off the ground and continuing like he wasn't there. The stick continued, crashing into the second and third man with an ever-increasing weight but no sign of stopping. The hunter didn't even slow down as his single hit tore through the wave, striking the 5 remaining Yakuza with one hit from his club. The force launched the Yakuza backward, throwing them off their feet and into the wall with enough force to crack ribs. They slid off it and bounced off each other, dropping one by one to the floor like sacks of flour. Hunter stumbled out of his overzealous hit, working his arm and checking his spiked bat thing. Even he was surprised that it didn't snap in two from that. Looks like he was underestimating just how tough. Yakuza Hunter's thoughts were cut off as something grabbed his arm, suddenly jerking him forward as a new Yakuza pulled him down and slammed his knee into Hunter's stomach before giving the vigilante a heavy kick, sending the beast stumbling backward for a second and giving the Yakuza a much-needed break. The Yakuza who finally made the Hunter pause addressed the rest, his tone still urgent but now with a hint of anger. He's tough, but he's not infallible. Where's the backup? Right air, jackass. Yakuza Hunter had been pushed back, but he still wasn't done. Those weak-ass hits barely even tickled. Yakuza Hunter lurched forward, sprinting off the ground and into the Yakuza. Hunter dug his shoulder into the criminal's stomach and pushed, lifting the Yakuza off the ground. He continued his charge straight into a wall, slamming into it at top speed Yakuza first. Hunter then leapt back to build distance, spinning his body with grace and precision as he hit the Yakuza with a spinning back kick. Besides the kick being payback for the Yakuza's own kick, it also made the Yakuza double over in pain as he clutched his stomach. And dropped his guard entirely. Hunter raised the studded stick over his head, taking a short breath in as he relaxed his arms. His feet were spaced, he had a little distance to move, that just left. Ha! Yakuza Hunter shouted again as he stepped forward into a downward swing, putting all his weight and power into clubbing this unfortunate criminal in the back. The stick hurtled through the air, crashing into and through its unfortunate victim without even a hint of stopping until it slammed the Yakuza into the floor with enough force to crack the ground. Its unfortunate passenger scarcely do anything besides moan as he went unconscious, stuck an inch into the floor. Yakuza Hunter looked down at his latest victim, smiling wide. Now this was fun. He took a step back away from the wall, turning to face the rest of the. A Yakuza slammed a sledgehammer into Yakuza Hunter's stomach, sending the vigilante stumbling back while holding his gut, struck hard by the sudden reversal. Another Yakuza jumped in at this opportunity, slamming a chair over the hunter's head repeatedly. The Yakuza advanced with every strike while the hunter continued to slowly move backward, covering his neck and head with an arm. Hey, I got the guys from upstairs. One of the Yakuzas returned with backup, but the other spare Yakuza seemed a lot more relaxed and a little more annoyed now as Yakuza Hunter was pushed into a corner. Shin and Zhao are already pushing him back, and you dipshits couldn't hear this. What are you all, stupid? The annoyed Yakuza finished fishing around and grabbed something from inside one of the gambling rooms, a gun, before moving out into the hall to help clean up. The heroes could be here at any second. Get the files, break the computers, and let's get the fuck out of air. Most of the second wave of Yakuza was barely concerned with the intruder since they had no clue who it was and instead interested in the incoming evacuation. The man who was shouting at everyone, the third man in charge and current leader with the other two now unconscious, walked over with anger and indignation in his steps, quickly activating his quirk to scan for any weak spots on his victim. Yakuza Hunter was stuck in a corner, being violently beat into the floor by the two giants as he took repeated blows from the sledgehammer and now an entire table. Whoever this fucker was, he had gotten them into some real shit. The heroes they didn't pay off could show up at any time, if they needed to get out ASAP. The physical damage he caused was irrelevant to the damage he almost caused to their operation. The leader opened the revolver, thinking momentarily about stripping away the man's quirk with one of the anti-quirk bullets before deciding against it. Didn't want to leave any evidence yet, and besides, why shoot some weird medical bullet when .45 worked wonders? Get moving, everyone. Anyone still here in a minute is as good as dead if Overhaul hears about this. He snarled as he loaded all the chambers, content to spend a little money to make sure this fucker was dead. Now, you, looks you got a little overexcited, huh, you piece of shit. He raised the gun as he shouted and emptied the gun into Yakuza Hunter, firing all 5 shots in 3 seconds. He then holstered the gun without reloading. Didn't want bullet casings on the ground, even if the police were inept they still did have eyes. Had to make it a little difficult for the fuckers later. Now, he had to move whoever was unconscious. If he could salvage this mess he might get a raise. Overexcited. The deep voice cut through everyone's thoughts as the figure in the corner shifted, a deep rumble filling the gambling house. He was laughing. Yakuza Hunter wasn't dead and was instead laughing as he put his hand on the wall, his fingers puncturing the wall as he pulled himself to his full height of 6'6". His bone-white skin still shone in the artificial light as he moved, so pale it almost hurt to look at, but that was nothing compared to his body. Overexcited? Me. There wasn't even a bruise from the sledgehammer's impacts, or so much as a scratch. As Yakuza Hunter rose to his full height, the bullets began to fall off his chest, having failed to even penetrate the first layer of his skin. The bullets made a soft ting tilde as they fell off his body, already as tough as steel and becoming even harder as he laughed, relishing the thrill of it all. Man, and I thought Sendy was talking bull when he said how hard this sheet gets. The imposing figure of the Yakuza Hunter stood as tall as it could, radiating confidence as it towered over everyone before suddenly shifting forward, leaning towards the men. Y'all sure showed me. His voice was so loud and thickly accented it was almost impossible to make out what he was actually saying, but most people could figure it out as the hunter dropped the stick. He had no idea how to use it and only took the thing with him since Sendy gave it to him, but now. Don't give up now. The main man assumed a more natural stance as he leaned forward, his fingers tense like claws. With his durability, they practically were. His smile was so large it could almost be seen from underneath the ill-fitting Oni mask as his body tensed like a spring compressed, aiming everything at his targets as he spoke. This is where the fun begins. And then the demon struck. Midoriya relaxed outside the Yakuza gambling den, leaning against the wall while sitting atop a pile of boxes and kicking his legs. There was a light bit of fog tonight, and it really worked with the red light district's lights to create some cool. Bang. Bang. Create some cool sights as the neon lights reflected off the clouds. The tinges of color fading and rolling with the sky served to create an almost fantastical view, like something out of a bang. 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 Like something out of a fantasy novel, with a sky that made no sense or 2 moons. Impossible colors mixed with the faint view of the moon to create a serenity that wasn't very reflected in the city around him. Revenant glanced over at the heroes and cops he'd been taking pot shots at with Cupid, idly spinning the gun on a finger. Backup, we need backup. We have sights on Wraith, but we can't get close. Revenant was leaning back, relaxing, but not because he wanted to. Well, not just because he wanted to. Midoriya was so tired and sore he probably couldn't fight in any real way. So, he didn't. Midoriya brought the bodysuit and a gun that he knew still worked, sat back, and took down most of the incoming heroes single-handedly. It only took one good charge shot and then they wouldn't be so cocky about rushing in. A few gunshots broke the night that weren't his. Midoriya glanced inward to the gambling hall, surprised but calm. Mao had gotten beaten by bullets before, when he didn't expect them, but here. Well, Revenant only hoped Mao could remember the no-killing statement they made at the beginning. The inside of the building was in complete disarray now as Yakuza Hunter tore through everything. The hunter grabbed one Yakuza by the throat, uppercutting the ceiling with him and then dropping him, ending it by punting the Yakuza across the room into other Yakuzas to continue destabilizing while toying with his new buds. A table was smashed into him, making Yakuza Hunter slide across the strangely slick tile once again. He was having a hard time getting a grip on this floor, so obviously he just needed to change the floor a little. As the Yakuza with the table came back in for another swing, the hunter accepted it with open arms, literally. Yakuza Hunter dropped all guard and caught the table with his face, then grabbed onto it with both arms, talon-like fingers piercing the wood. The Yakuza struggled to pull free as Yakuza Hunter turned, lifting the table and the man up in one motion before slamming both against the wall. The Yakuza's grip slipped as he staggered back, then was hit in the face with the entire table just like a certain hunter had just been. Yakuza Hunter lobbed the table across the room at the man with the sledgehammer like a frisbee, sending him running for cover while Hunter charged the man who'd been swinging a table around like a bat. He drove the giant into the wall, grabbing the man by his head before vigorously slamming it back and forth relentlessly. A Yakuza sprung forward with a knife from behind him, charging with a thrusting grip. Good idea, terrible execution. He liked it. Yakuza Hunter spun on a dime with table guy still in hand, using his other hand to grab knife guy by the skull, lifting him completely off the ground. This didn't stop knife guy as he stabbed wildly, jabbing the knife straight at the massive intruder's chest. Not that it did anything, deflecting off the skin like a stick off sheet metal, but hey. The intention was there. He could respect the effort. Yakuza Hunter wasn't quite used to being this short. Seriously, 6'6". That was short as fuck. Boot tilde he had to look like Sendipider and this was as short as he could get, so here he was. The hunter laughed off the stab before slamming the two Yakuzas together, skull first, then tossing knife guy into the air and punting him into the ceiling. He then lifted the still-moving table guy with one hand, dragging him across the ground. Yakuza Hunter nodded, surprised that the guy was still conscious, then fell to the ground and slammed the man's skull straight into his own, knocking the Yakuza out immediately. Yakuza Hunter held the man up, checking that he was really unconscious while more bullets hit him from behind. He barely noticed now, sufficiently hyped to take things like pistols and revolvers without a cinch. Only when he was satisfied that his current opponent really was conked out did the hunter drop him like a sack of rocks and sprint across the room in a heartbeat, crashing straight into his remaining opponents. His movements were staccato as he took on each opponent, focusing them down one at a time and using his superior durability to turn each fight into a good old-fashioned brawl. He'd grab their gun with one hand and begin to pummel them in the skull with the other, then drag them around like ragdolls as they tried to escape. He'd grab objects with his teeth like pipes, holding their weapons in place while he used his long legs like cannons to pay back hits double. And for anyone stupid enough to try and go into the brawl. Well, the main man didn't consider himself a brawler for nothing. Yakuza Hunter stood just 3 feet from the last guy in the middle of the room, exchanging precise and powerful blows for molten fists. The molten skin and heat flooded over the hunter, but it couldn't sink in. Meanwhile, the well-aimed cannon shots literally sunk into the volcanic man and didn't create any lasting damage. It was like punching the ocean. What a blast. Ya ain't bad at all. Yakuza Hunter laughed as another fist slammed into his skull, shoving his head upward without getting any real results before his head snapped back down with a vicious smile underneath the heavily damaged Oni mask. But ya ain't good either. The animal suddenly stepped forward, slapping both of Molten Man's arms to the side to open up his guard. The Yakuza Hunter then slipped his leg around his opponent's, twisting his own arms around Magma Man's neck and squeezing sharply. His leg pushed the Magman down and forward while his arms yanked backward and up like he was trying to rip this punk's head off. Either he decapitated this Yakuza or choked him out, and he didn't really care which. Unfortunately for the Hunter, the Yakuza wasn't as stupid as his face would lead you to believe and deactivated his quirk on his neck. He kept his quirk active on most of his body, but it hardly mattered as the Yakuza's pace slowed down due to strangulation. After only 5 seconds of Yakuza Hunter's crushing pin, the man went limp and his body began to cool off, returning to flesh and bone from the semi-liquid stone. Yakuza Hunter then dropped his last victim, giving him one last heavy kick to the ribs to make sure he stayed down before spinning on around, totally excited. He hadn't had this much fun since the last time he really fought Ronin. His body felt like fire, and damn it felt good. He adopted a combat stance as he scanned the room. A ruined building that once was a gambling hall, judging by all the smashed furniture. A few of the walls had been shattered and punched through, like a bull rampaging indoors. About 20-odd people lay about the place, all unconscious. Nobody was left standing. Yakuza Hunter did a second sweep to make sure he saw everything before taking a deep breath out. Seemed like Magman really was the last of them, so now it was time to calm down and breathe. The last man standing shook his head, shaking off the addictive thrill of the fight. His quirk let him resist his quirk's psychological effects, but resistance wasn't immunity. It felt like he was getting drenched in ice water as he took deep breaths to collect his head. Now that he was done, the definitely real Yakuza Hunter turned towards the door and moved the table he'd thrown in front of it, casually shoving it to the side and opening it up for his partner in crime. You finished, or did you just want to show me personally taking down the last Yakuza? Sendipider was sitting on some boxes just across from the entrance, casually flicking a gun up and shooting something that the main man couldn't see. Sheet, I totally should've. Fuck. He lightly struck his head at not thinking of something so cool before moving on. It was water under the bridge. Finished our last guy. Damn, this sheet's a blast. No wonder dear so many hero fuckers and dumbass vigilantes. Thanks. Sendipider slid off the box and walked inside, closing the door after himself. Could you seal that up? Oh, we ain't going out this way. Ya got some secret escape route for this spy sheet. Yakuza Hunter laughed as he pushed the table back over the door, then added a second table for security's sake. The first table was to make sure no one could get out, the second was to make sure no one could get in now that there wasn't any physical resistance. Don't worry, Hunter, just watch and learn. Midoriya stretched as he walked into the gambling den, taking in the scenery slowly as his head panned across the room once, then twice. Bang. Bang. Midoriya holstered kindness for now and started checking the bodies, surveying who needed medical attention and who just needed a zip tie around the wrists. So, how's the vigilante life, Hunter? Have any fun? Damn straight, one of those fuckers lifted a table like it's some baseball bat. Dat sheet was funny as fuck. Mao laughed heartily, then glanced around. Midoriya thought the big guy looked a little confused, but it was hard to read with the broken Yakuza Hunter mask stuck across his face. What did ya shoot at? Are there invisible fuckers? Worse. Cameras. Midoriya zip-tied the 12th Yakuza, then gestured to the bodies he already tied up. A real pain in the ass for vigilantes. Can get you caught without noticing. Hey, Hunter, move the bodies together. Mao lifted the men with ease, arranging them neatly against the wall before frisking them and tossing anything interesting. Mao liked to fight, so Midoriya figured he'd enjoy doing a little vigilante work. Since this was Mao's first time doing vigilante work, Midoriya had tried to come up with something to disguise the giant. Mao had a very distinctive appearance, after all, so Midoriya decided to try and cover him up with an old disguise. And who better to take the fall to be Mao's cover than the overly violent Yakuza Hunter? The mask had to be adjusted. Usually, it was a full helmet that covered the head, but Mao's skull was too big to fit in it, so they ripped the back off and called it good. Besides, Mao naturally had the right hair color for it. And that brought up Mao's next surprise. Alrighty, let's see Tilda what you got. Mao finished moving all the bodies and moved beside Midoriya to inspect the goods on the Yakuza. While Mao still towered over Midoriya, the distance between them had literally gotten a lot closer in a few hours, with Mao shrinking from 8:4 to 6:6. Plus, instead of his usual bronze skin, he looked white as a ghost. Kind of like a certain vigilante. 6 guns. You see any you like? Midoriya ignored the fact that Mao was most certainly mocking him, especially when he realized that he was so pale that Mao wasn't too far off, and instead focused on what the Yakuza had. Some weapons, some phones, nothing amazing. Yeah, I want dat revolver. Dat cool. Whoa. Mao was taken aback as Midoriya tossed it to him, Midoriya combing through the wallets and taking some extra cash. He had to finance his vigilante career somehow, and there was nothing like a little groundwork to get a little funding. Alright, when you're done here we'll sweep the next floor. You ready? Midoriya shoved anything interesting into his loot bag, an essential item for a vigilante on a budget, then shouldered the bag. He could question Mao's fuckery later. Mao stopped checking the guns out and nodded, standing up and collecting a few of the pistols for later. Yeah, dear gonna be more cameras up dear. If there's anything worth a shit up there, so let's hope so, Midoriya mumbled as he stretched his back and stood, adjusting his loot bag as he hit the stairs. If there was anything good up there, well, tonight could be very lucrative indeed. Chapter and notes. You Tilda, what a confusing mess. I was debating putting Mao's third quirk either here or in the next chapter, but then I realized I'm not putting Mao's quirk. I'm putting Yakuza Hunter's quirk here, so here goes. Totally real Yakuza Hunter. Quirks. Hype. Energy quirk number 12. Shapeshifting quirk number 69. Shapeshifting quirk number 69. Allows minor changes to a person's appearance, including skin, hair, eye color. Height. Was originally supposed to be shapeshifting quirk number 72, but switched by personal request. Can change color to anything that's possible for a normal human. Can reduce increase height by 11 inches relative to base. These types of quirks were originally given to AFO operatives who don't age, change countries to hide their pasts. Affiliation. Yakuza's, technically birthday, summer, 2052 height, 198 cm, 6 feet blood type. Likes, close difficult fights, anything exhilarating. Yakuza hunters, third quirk will be explained more later when Midoriya and Mao aren't on a time crunch with heroes rapidly approaching. These mind games were annoying. Maybena, fuck this. Mao was going to beat around the bush a little more, but the main man didn't have the patience for shit like that. Ya want me to fight crime or some shit like that with ya? Could be fun for you. Midoriya didn't deny it and played Mao's game, going for the straight answer. I'm not in the best condition to keep up my usual hours, but with all might gone, crime's gonna rise. And it's gonna rise fast. Revenant inspected the view outside of their restaurant. A mostly empty street save for a few stragglers outlined by the window frame. It wasn't obvious but there was a change in people from 2 weeks ago. Laws only work if ya can hold them up, Mao said as he put his fork down. With da boss and da big man gone, this whole place about to shake up real bad. New crime and new heroes on da rise, it's a land of new opportunities. Can I get a second order thanks? Mao waved goodbye to their server, smiling, but the smile was uncharacteristically still as Mao uncharismatically stalled. But, well, ya know. The police and the heroes aren't rising fast enough. And everyone knows it. Revenant kept his gaze locked out the window on those people, certain of the difference. The people outside had changed. There was an air of uncertainty now, and uncertainty bred fear. The people of Japan were scared after the loss of their #1 hero. Endeavor was a fine hero, much better than All Might at a purely technical level, but he didn't have the people's trust. For all his skill, his personality basically ensured he could never be the true #1 hero. Revenant even heard rumors that a student from UA was projected to take the #1 title in a few years, some kid named Mirio. Revenant didn't believe it from the footage he saw, but if he could change so much in a year maybe some moron who accidentally lost all his clothes at a sports festival could too. It's gonna be real profitable to be a villain for the next few years. Mao leaned on the table, eyes unfocused as he stared into the future. He spoke with experience, probably having already seen something similar in his line of work. Lots of smaller villains will crop up now that the monopoly's broken. That problem popped up a lot. In taking down a large villain, heroes accidentally poked the hornet's nest and released a new wave of crime. If they could have taken down and arrested All for One it might have been worth it, but All for One had just turned to mud and escaped. It was a total loss for heroism by almost all accounts. So, you trying to appeal to my humanity? Mao fixed Midoriya with a steely gaze, his face fixed with its usual smile. A mix of confidence and excitement as his muscles tensed, ready for a fight as he leaned forward to get a little closer. Sure, Japan's gonna go over. Everyone sees it coming, but so. I could be making a huge profit out of this. Sheet, I still work for da boss man, and he ain't going nowhere age. Thanks for the food. Mao kept it clean simple, only pausing to start eating his second bowl. Like Wraith had always said, villainy was a smart man's career. It had a huge future right now without equal. If you were willing to strike when the iron was hot, you could change all of Japan if you acted now. And that cut to Wraith and Mao's central point. So, da big question. Mao paused in his eating to lock eyes with the vigilante in front of him, making sure to get a good hard stare in. Why da fuck would I help you? Midoriya looked away from the window and slowly met Mao's gaze, matching the excitement and adrenaline with a calm blank stare. It was unnerving, the skills he picked up from being bullied. All emotion masked, covered, then crushed as a boy became a monster. Even Mao was pushed back slightly under its unflinching, unblinking, dead stare. I'll make a suit for you with the muscle bodysuit. Mao slammed a fist onto the table, shaking it as he jumped to his feet. Fuck yeah. You could have just admitted you wanted one. Midoriya shook his head, his suppressed smile growing to cover his whole face. Mao mentioned wanting to buy one before, but with All for One gone only Midoriya could make more. This meant the only way to get one was from Midoriya, and no one else even knew what they were. Zhu admitted. No way. My pride wouldn't let me, man. Mao sat back down, raising his hands incredulously like it was inevitable. The tension had left the room entirely as they sat down now to sort the details of their new deal. Pretty good at this drawing sheet. Ya considered an artsy career. Mao peered over Midoriya's shoulder at hero analysis for the future number 15 in the newly updated pages on the beast. Mao had been using his weird shapeshifting quirk to slowly turn back. It wasn't quick but, over an hour, Mao definitely got taller and tanner, if tanner was a word. He still wasn't his full height but he was definitely past 7 foot already. Good, but it's not a very stable career. Plus it doesn't have the same catharsis as drop-kicking a mugger. Midoriya responded without so much as blinking, finishing the last of the detail work. Together they had just finished putting together the rough details of the new Yakuza Hunter costume. The original Yakuza Hunter had a costume designed for quirkless combat. A thick mask for headbutting and head protection, loose pants for mobility, and Aizawa's weird magic bandages around the shoulders and upper body to serve as support for Midoriya's injured arm. But none of that was helpful to Mao, so it was time for a few changes. The mask was fine, could be modified for better visibility, but the headbutting function was viable. Some extra defense on the head was some good defense. The bandages were getting replaced by a muscle suit. Midoriya didn't have infinite bandages so he wasn't going to waste them, but he could make tons of the bodysuits thanks to its regeneration quirk. Cut off a piece, regenerate it into a new suit, then stretch and tear it until it was the right size for the giant. Simple enough. The rest of the costume formed naturally. New pants and shoes, maybe a holster since Mao knew how to handle guns. Maybe give him a kanabo just for old time's sake. The plan was that Midoriya would spend his off time recovering and working on the costumes. He still had his own costume to fix on top of making a new one, so this was going to take a while. Between updates to Ronin and the creation of Yakuza Hunter 2, he was gonna have his hands full. Tomorrow I'm going to be working on the basics for the costumes. Next week though, Monday, we're gonna get to some serious work. Midoriya reviewed the schedule, spinning the pencil between his fingers as his eyes checked the facts. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays he'd spend doing physical training. Tuesdays and Thursdays were costume days. That left the weekend, tomorrow, as a free period. Good timing too, since he had to sort through all the stolen files. Thank God the Yakuza didn't do everything digitally. Let's see. Mao put down his fourth bowl and also checked his new outfit, wiping a few grains of rice off with a flick of his thumb. I can get a motor helmet to use as a base, I got a couple backcoat spares. Pants and boots too. Should I wear a jacket like you? Get that matching set sheet. Let's just focus on the essentials first, we can add extras once we know the basic stuff works. Midoriya wrote down a small list of the stuff Mao would need to get. But yeah, boots, pants, that stuff you can get for yourself. The helmet would be great too since I'm not sure I can get a helmet in your size. Alright. Mao clapped his hands together, rubbing them with glee before he picked back up his fourth bowl and finished it in seconds. But, when we gonna do that? Yeah no. They had it all planned out except for one thing. The actual vigilanting. There was no set day or date for them to do that, but someone already thought about it. We'll start when we have a prototype of your costume. Revenant flipped to his own costume as he spoke, mind already racing ahead. If they were going to work on costumes, the Ronin outfit arguably had more work to do than the Yakuza Hunter one. Your costume will be wearable and functional by next week, so expect to work on it Tuesday but use it Wednesday. I getcha. And ya gonna spend some time fixing your sheet. Mao had noticed Midoriya's costume. While the police might not have even figured out who he was, Mao had got a clear view of just how much disrepair it was in. Even a child could figure out the giant tears and holes probably weren't intentional. That's my weekend, but don't worry. I won't forget to work on your items as well. Revenant was probably going to spend a lot of time tearing his current costume apart Saturday, then Sunday he completely forgot about Sunday. That was family outing day. Alright, they'd just have to work a little harder. No, dipcheat. Mao interrupted Midoriya and Revenant's plan with a single sturdy flick to the skull. What are ya doing? Making the costumes. Res tilde tang dum tilde ass. Mao spelled it out for him, shaking his head as he stood up, picking up his bag. Seriously, is it that hard to remember to not work? This is literally the easiest cheat. Ever. Oh, you right. Midoriya blushed in embarrassment, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry. Getting so focused on boring sheet so ya forget to have some fun ya for real. Mao laughed as he grabbed his jacket and hung it off his shoulders, then flipped some of Midoriya's green mop hair over his face. Ya don't need to be sorry, dipcheat. Zhu Jill. I know it might surprise ya, man, but I don't need this costume anytime soon. I got my own tricks. Mao tapped his face which was still shifting back to normal, the skin still shifting to Mao's signature deep tan. Ya know what I do need? A fifth bowl. Probably, but my wife's making dinner and I wanted a snack before I went. Asshole, but I need you in top shape for Monday when I'm gonna bust ya ass. I saw ya moves, and we both know ya need the rest. Nobody, not even furry fucker, had seen more of Midoriya's style than Mao. Not because of how long he saw it, but the times he saw. Midoriya had met Mao almost every time his style changed in any significant way from his first real fight to when he learned how to use his most overpowered weapon to date. That's why Mao was so sure that Midoriya had been underperforming today. Ya don't rush ya moves, so don't rush ya trainin'. Mao laughed as he gave Midoriya another heavy slap across the back, throwing the kid into the table. Ya break ya limits a lot, and that's good. But that means ya broken and ya need some time to heal. That's oddly inspiring, and very unlike you. Revenant could smell a trap coming, but he couldn't quite figure out what. Mao. Well, I'd feel bad if my best competitor kicked his own ass without me. Mao just laughed off Revenant's suspicions as he walked to the door, giving a quick wave goodbye. Plus, if I didn't, I'd feel bad about the payback. Later tilde. Mao left the chicken place as Midoriya stared in confusion, trying to figure out what the main man meant for a minute before giving up and packing his things. He really was kicking his own ass. Nobody could beat Ronin like Ronin could, and his performance tonight had shown it. He hadn't gotten to go in and help Mao clear the gambling den out because he'd been too tired. All he could do was hold off the police with some pistols and a bodysuit that did most of the work for him. He needed to get back in shape. He wanted to surpass his past, not be weighed down by his bad decisions. That meant putting in the work and time, and that included resting. Midoriya rose, once again recentered and refocused. It was a little early to go to bed, but he had a big day tomorrow and he might as well get started. If he wanted to take everything so fast he should quickly start resting. Midoriya picked up his bags and stood, getting ready to leave. Here's your check, sir. And then he got hit with the check for the meal. His drink, his bowl, and Mao's drink, and Mao's 4 extra large bowls, that's slicing off. Chapter and notes. Yo, just sipping back in, the release schedule is whack because of motivation and finals. Most of my finals should be finished by next week though, so here's hoping. This chapter had a lot of drafts before it switched to its current style. I was stuck in this semi-serious face-off with the protags and the heroes, it was slow and sludge-why, real bad. I wound up axing that and trying to go for a more Lupin 3 feel. We just got out of a big dark moment and I'm trying to keep the tone a little lighter, hope it's working and hope it's actually making the story better. The pacing is a huge part of what I think makes Mao a fun character. He keeps it running at a fast pace which allows for the plot to move quickly, which really helps the chapters he's in. Stalling is one of the worst things a fanatic that's been Mia can do in my eyes. Anything else? We're gonna do some stuff with Inko soon and some more crafting, but I genuinely have no idea if anyone liked the crafting besides me. If not, big oof, cause we're gonna be talking a lot about the possessed items and modifications. Anyways, I'm a bail now. Gotta go fail some finals, Satoodles. Chapter 172. Chapter summary. Midoriya starts to set up his new regiment into something besides train and get his ass kicked. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya kept his eyes closed and his breathing steady, trying to lay as flat as possible with no movement. The day after both surviving Mao's training and pulling off a Yakuza raid was turning out to be very rough for Midoriya. Because of the soreness of his muscles? No. Because of injuries sustained during the training and fighting? No. Midoriya could understand those. Midoriya could respect those. Instead, Midoriya was stuck in his bed, eyes closed even though he was wide awake. Mao had told him to get somewhere between 8 and 9 hours of sleep, so he was at least going to stay in bed for 8 hours. Sure, he only got 7 as usual, but if he just sat in his bed doing nothing for another hour that probably counted. Right. The bed that normally felt so warm and cozy instead was lumpy and stiff as Midoriya counted the minutes away, and he couldn't be more grateful when his alarm finally went off and ended his self-imposed sanction. He sprung from his bed and quickly got to work with his morning routine going from stretches, shower, then breakfast all in under 10 minutes. It was the weekend so he had nowhere to go, no appointments to fulfill. It would have been the perfect time for a good long patrol, but no. His mother wasn't up, so he had to make his own breakfast and that meant it wasn't going to be impressive. A couple of energy bars, some water, and Midoriya had done all the cooking he was qualified for. He cleaned off his glass and checked his pace. 5:13 a.m., he was making great time. But if he was making great time, did that mean he was doing a terrible job at relaxing? Midoriya didn't really do relaxing. He did small things to relax of course, like the time he spent with his mother or Eiko, but he didn't really fill an entire day with just relaxing. He couldn't, not as a quirkless kid living in a world of supers. If relaxing was just doing things he enjoyed, Well, he still wasn't sure what he'd do then, but he probably wouldn't stay trapped in his apartment and just work on the suits. Midoriya dried off and shelved his glass, then paused. Why did he have to stay in his room? Why would he just work on the suits? He used to go out, spending hours chasing heroes for fun. While he probably wouldn't be doing that today, there was no reason to keep himself locked up. Hell, staying here when he didn't want to was a downright stupid idea. The old office he started in, Ishimi High, even just seeing if Eiko had anything she wanted to do, there were a lot of places he could go. Revenant did want to get some work done, but Ishimi's crafting club room was a much better place to work on that stuff than his own small room. In fact, it was completely illogical to stay here and try to work on the suits. Was fatigue catching up with him if he was missing things this obvious? Probably. Midoriya closed the cabinet and stretched, thinking through what he wanted to do today. First, work on the suits. Second, check the papers he stole. Third, nope, just two, keeping it nice and simple. Midoriya ducked into his room quickly, grabbing his loot and costume bag before booking it out the door, then deliberately slowing down on the stairs. Sure, he didn't really get what Mao was talking about most of the time, but he'd at least try to relax today. It was 5 in the morning, a time so early that most of UA were still sound asleep. Most heroes worked long late shifts, so the morning was a gap period with very few active heroes. On top of that, it was the weekend. The halls of UA High School were completely vacant. The training rooms were devoid of all life for a change. For once, UA High School was completely devoid of people, but not of animals. Principal Nezu stirred his tea, having just finished his morning ritual. He was a principal, not a hero, so he didn't bother staying up late and instead chose to wake up bright and early. This increased his attentiveness, gave him more time to wake up before he had any of his meetings, and that wasn't even counting the nice cool air. Nezu climbed into his chair, taking a second to get comfy before he put down his tea and checked the morning's work. Even when he finished all his workload before going home, new problems seemed to creep in from every angle. It truly was miraculous. He began to sort through the papers that had been faxed to him. First off was more the musings of the Hero Association, fresh from that meeting he didn't bother with. They'd been so uptight since All Might's retirement but had yet to actually put anything into motion. By Nezu's calculations, he'd have to wait another month before they started doing that, so no reason to attend their meetings if he didn't have to. He skimmed what had happened in the meeting regardless, just to make sure his prediction was on point. A presentation over the damages, a discussion about the League of Villains. It seemed his predictions might have been too generous to the Hero Association. Nezu tapped the papers on his desk to get them neat and orderly before feeding them into a shredder, then turning to deal with the other papers given to him. While the Hero Association wasn't doing anything worthwhile this week, he always had to check their reports first just to make sure. Wouldn't want something actually important to sneak up on him. The other papers were reports of recent villain activities, a few of which could be important. Even better, they could be interesting and very informative on larger issues. League of Villains, League of Villains. Nope, still nothing. Nezu checked all the reports for any sign of the League of Villains. As the heirs of All for One, all of Hero Societine, all of Japan was keeping an eye out for them but to no avail. The League were most likely using the chaos to recover and rebuild their organization, just like All for One told them to. If left alone they could return to their old power, or worse, surpass it. Without a trace of them, however, it was impossible for the Hero Association to run interference or even try to stop them. Finding the League was priority number 1 for the Japanese Hero Association. But since they hadn't been found yet, Nezu decided to turn his attention to the problems that were right in front of his face and check the individual reports to learn what the Hero Association had found in the brief time he'd been out. There were 12 reports, 2 marked high importance and 1 marked high rank. High importance meant it was relevant to an ongoing investigation, high rank meant it was a threat that would require at least a top 10 hero to have 3 in one night. All 3 of the tagged reports were written about a single incident, a small Yakuza gambling den that had been hit by a pair of villains late last night. The Shihisakai, a rising power in the villain world, seemed to have ties to that gambling house. A hero named Sir Night-Eye was running an investigation against the Shihisakai already, so hopefully he could get some useful information out of this. It didn't do much for Nezu, however, not nearly as much as the other 2 alerts. The other high important and the high rank were both about the same villain, a violent vigilante who had been seen attacking the gambling den, Yakuza Hunter. The 2 tags became self-evident when you knew who that was. A cross between a villain and a vigilante, a force of nature that swept cities and crushed anything standing in his way. Yakuza Hunter had gotten his name from his start when he took down 30 to 40 Yakuza every day, but the villain was more than content to beat anything in his way into submission. But, after a few weeks of work, he disappeared. Until last night. Yakuza Hunter had reappeared, and he brought a friend. They hit only a single gambling den, swiping some papers before leaving. At least, the reports read that it was Yakuza Hunter. This Yakuza Hunter had avoided fighting the heroes, but the classic Hunter wouldn't have done that. He had seemed to relish combat, letting more and more heroes arrive just so he could break them. The original would never have let anyone get away, so then, what was happening? Was this a copycat criminal, or did the villain change in his month away from the spotlight? His style seems the same, but it's not difficult to copy that. Nezu flicked through the 3 separate reports on the incident, paying careful attention to the notes on Yakuza Hunter before he set them all down to drink some of his tea. Perhaps speaking out loud would help him get his thoughts in order. Yakuza Hunter's quirk is common enough, something that increases endurance and durability. Someone with a high enough pain tolerance might be able to replicate his style. He could spend all day spitballing theories though. Nezu pushed the papers to the side, not bothering to shred papers that weren't classified. While this Yakuza Hunter business didn't seem important right now, it could rise up again. Besides, it could be a fun side project when he had time. Nezu scanned through the other 9 reports quickly, putting aside anything interesting for his own personal investigation and amusement. Investigating this kind of stuff was the police's job, but it made for great entertainment to him when he had the time. But right now he had his own form of entertainment. As he tossed the rejected reports across his desk, a few slid into the other thing on his desk. Not his giant computer, but a strange dirty duffel bag. A few things peeked out of that bag. A broken arm guard, a torn-up All Might hoodie, and a metal shard that might have once been a sword were just visible if you peered hard enough. Nezu's face broke into a genuine grin as he finished the last of his papers, setting them aside. He'd been swamped between All Might's retirement and running UA, but with the Hero Association taking most of the brunt for All Might and the weekend ending school for a minute, he finally had a bit of free time. Nezu flipped open his planner, doing a quick check of the dates as he reached for a phone to call an old friend. Knock knock Tilda. Nezu paused, switching to his computer view to check who was outside his office, then switching tabs. This was nothing to worry about, quite the contrary, this was great. To think the man of the year had come straight to him before school started up yet again. Come in, make yourself comfortable, please. Principal Nezu was quick to clean his environment, sorting the stacks more properly and quietly moving the suspicious bag to his side and then under the table. Tea. The tall man entered quietly and gave polite greetings as Nezu finished placing the reports to the side and offered his teapot. No, but thank you, sir. I have something I wanted to talk to you about. Of course, of course. Why else would you come to my office? Nezu was surprised his guest was up so early, but after his retirement, he must not have much to do. He was probably feeling a little antsy, and it was Nezu's job as his supervisor to help guide him through this part of his life, just like Nezu tried to guide his students. Nezu finished refilling his own tea and placed the pot down, taking a quick breath in before clasping his hands together and giving his guest his undivided attention. Now, Toshinori, what's on your mind? Midoriya held up the bodysuit with both hands, quickly flipping it to check the back before smiling and folding it up. The bodysuit's regenerative quirk had finished patching it back up. With enough time it would always regenerate back to top condition, but it was always a little weight off his shoulders to see for himself that everything was going well. Midoriya was in Ishiyama High School, sitting in the crafting club room with his Ronin costume splayed out on the table as he checked each item for just how damaged it was. His fight at the UA training camp left all his equipment damaged, but the severity of the damage was all over the spectrum. There were things like his pistols which were barely scratched, only having some minor damage to the grips, all the way to things like his jacket which had been ripped and blown to shreds. But those were just general statements. It was time to get specific and Midoriya intended to run down each item to really get to the bottom of how this repair session was going to go by examining each and every one of his items. He took a deep breath, rubbing the hair out of his face, then dove straight in. First off was the bodysuit, since he might as well start with that thing. The bodysuit had a regenerative quirk placed into it so as long as it had power it would slowly regenerate. It had taken tons of damage at the training camp and been completely overloaded in his fights, but in the passing week it had returned to peak condition. There'd be no need to repair it anymore, so into his bag it went. Guns next. Kindness had taken a little more damage than Cupid since it had been closer to his sword in the explosions, but both guns could still fire. The handles and grips were just a bit mangled. Still, now that he was seeing Mao regularly he might ask for a little help with his firearms. No repairs are necessary, but a little tuning up wouldn't be amiss. Next came the boots and gauntlets, and with them came the start of the real problems. His boots were basically fine. A filthy, but save for a few scratches they were in perfect working order as far as he could tell. But his gauntlets were a mess. Large gashes and cracks on both, wires exposed, and a few of the finger pieces barely hanging on. These were first up on the repair list. Lastly, the unfixable. His old helmet, the previously all-black mask he wore, had been cracked open like an eggshell. Some of the small-time tech he packed into it was salvageable, but the helmet itself had to go. There was no saving it. In that same line, his jacket. Revenant had created a new jacket with a new quirk, but just like most of the jackets he had made throughout his vigilante career, it had been utterly destroyed. Maybe they were just cursed to be stuck with Mao's jacket for all eternity. Either way, the jacket itself was more strips and strings than an actual piece of clothing. Revenant held up what was left of it, noting the missing right sleeve and the lack of anything below the ribs. He'd worn it last night since he had nothing else to wear, but this thing was even worse off than his helmet. Still, it was a possessed item. Maybe they could salvage it, using bits of it to create a new weapon. This new jacket had a quirk to create spikes, so all they needed was enough material to make some pockets. Revenant nodded to himself, flipping open his notebook as he thought. He could see it now, a quick modification to his usual jacket. Some pockets to create the spikes, some electronics to rig it up. Yeah, he could see it coming together. But he didn't even have a jacket to modify yet. Take it one step at a time. No need to rush, no need at all. Unless it's more fun that way. Midoriya's expression changed to a smooth grin as he folded up the remains of the jacket, pushing it to one side. First, he had to work on those gauntlets, so he'd start by dismantling them. Now, where was his toolkit? Now, Toshinori, what's on your mind? Principal Nezu leaned forward with his usual calm yet perky demeanor. He sat casually in his chair, confident and poised. His body was relaxed and laid back while his eyes were a flurry of movement, taking in every detail. He was constantly thinking ahead, even right now. And across from him, Toshinori sat. Even as the former #1 hero, sitting in this chair across from Nezu still made him a little nervous. He squirmed slightly under Nezu's constant and crushing gaze, but he was the one who came here. Yes, he was the one who came here to question Nezu about something that the principal seemed to be covering up. There was no reason to be worried. I know that you must be concerned about your teaching position, Nezu spoke briskly, cutting through Toshinori's thoughts. But don't worry, even if you're not a formal hero anymore, I still believe you can achieve great things here at UA. After all, I'm not a formal hero either. Nezu kept on going without a second thought. This wasn't even Nezu trying to change the topic, this was just how Nezu usually worked, and it was why Toshinori had dreaded coming in. After all, you could clobber villains, but nothing short of a miracle could stop Nezu's rambling. I'd be happy to give you advice about trying to teach your students, but I think if you just put yourself out there and try you'll find that not a lot has changed from when you first came here. Nezu continued without a second thought, 100% sure this was why Toshinori had come in today and 200% wrong. No, even retired, you're still a great hero. Besides, it takes much more than just a quirk to be a great teacher. Why, Sir, Toshinori went for the classic way to get Nezu's attention and raised a hand, finally getting himself out of Nezu's flow and creating a break. That's not what I came here to talk about. Not today, at least. Well, why didn't you say so? Nezu blinked at him innocently, but even so, Nezu was definitely smiling a little wider now. Toshinori didn't know if Nezu was deliberately hiding something or if his boss was just messing with him, but either way, the principal was definitely enjoying this. So what did you want to talk about? Toshinori didn't bother taking a second to compose himself, lest Nezu snuck in and switch the topic again. I wanted to talk to you about the stranger from when we tried to capture All for One in the league. Oh, Nezu blinked, surprised, then leaned forward. That's it. Yes. I just thought, you know. Nezu swirled his tea around a little before looking back up at Toshinori. It'd be something a little less vague. The stranger from when we tried. The man who saved my life when I fought my master in All for One. Toshinori tried to clarify, but this was the problem about trying to go fast so Nezu couldn't interrupt. He couldn't really keep pace mentally and so not everything he was going to say would make sense. The one with the guns and the swords. Yes, I remember him. Nezu nodded along and stopped to take a sip, then glanced up at Toshinori in confusion a third time. Why didn't you start with that? You're making this awfully complicated, you know. Toshinori was dumbstruck for a moment but pulled himself together quickly, straightening in his chair. Yes, I suppose so, sir. But that man. I think you know more about that man than you're letting on. Toshinori moved on in spite of his nerves and locked eyes with Nezu, cutting straight to the center of the issue and going straight for Nezu's cover-up. I read the medical report, but for some reason, it ends as soon as he got onto an ambulance with you and there's no trace of where he went. The only lead that's left is that report, which you changed. Correct. Nezu didn't even try to deny it, answering with a completely straight face and taking Toshinori by surprise again. He took a second to take a drink from his teacup, disrupting Toshinori's momentum just a touch more, then continued to make unflinching and unwavering eye contact. I was the one who made that record and chose to end it early. I did put my name on that report, after all. Oh, Toshinori wasn't sure what he'd been expecting, but it definitely hadn't been this. Definitely a stronger reaction, maybe some more of Nezu's signature rambling. Do you have some personal interest in that man? Nezu took a slow sip of his tea as he stared down Toshinori, purposely dragging this out as he locked eyes with his confused subordinate and forcing some order into that thick skull that even all for one hadn't managed to break. What brought this all up? Well, I suppose I do have some interest in that man. Toshinori had been so busy getting confused by Nezu that he forgot why he came here. He wasn't here to accuse Nezu of covering something up, he was here to learn about the person who saved his life. He'd been getting sidetracked, but now that Nezu had forced him to take a step back, he was refocused. Yes, I want to meet him again, if possible. Nezu blinked a few times, head cocked as his stare lost its usual glossy edge and he looked surprised. That's it. I suppose so. Toshinori was more sure of himself now. He didn't want anything complicated, just a chance to meet the man, no, meet the hero that had stepped in to save his life and thank him personally. Toshinori wasn't sure how hard it'd be to meet this hero or how long it would take. He'd been the #1 hero in both America and Japan, but even he didn't have an idea who that man could have been beneath the mask. He could have left Japan entirely, still be in the hospital, or worse. I want to meet this man one last time and thank him for his services to me in Japan. Toshinori rubbed his hands together, a little nervous for such a stupid request. All Might and the Hero Association had already officially thanked this nameless hero and offered a large reward for his efforts, but the real one yet had to come forward. But Toshinori still wanted to meet him. So, could you please help me, sir? Toshinori rose from his chair suddenly and bowed. Although this nameless hero didn't want to come forward, Toshinori still wanted to meet this man one last time for himself. It was a little selfish, a little arrogant, and all around pointless, but Toshinori still wanted it. Even if this hero didn't want to be seen, Toshinori wanted to let him know that someone did appreciate the work he'd done. I know that it will be very difficult to find and meet him, but please. Alrighty Tilda. Toshinori lost all of his momentum for a third time, rising from his bow already confused. Was it really that easy? You just wanted to meet him for a bit and talk to him, correct? The one with the guns and the swords. Nezu smiled reassuringly, using a ruler to get some extra reach and pat Toshinori on the shoulder before turning towards his tablet. I can't promise he'll want to meet you, but I can definitely help you meet him. Really thank you, sir. Toshinori got up to leave, excited that this mess somehow ended how he wanted to when he was stopped by the poke of a ruler. Nezu glanced up from his tablets, stopping over a particular contact. Where are you going, Toshinori? This meeting isn't over yet. It isn't. All Might stopped, bringing his confused total to 4 as Nezu pushed the tablet forward a bit. Of course not. You wanted to meet him. Nezu spoke with a big grin as he pushed the call then speaker buttons on the tablet then leaned back in his chair with a wicked grin. So let's get this all worked out right now and call him. Reing tilde re-click tilde. Chapter end notes. Yo, this chapter was way too hard to release. Fun times all around until All Might rolls up and I spent 3 days trying to fix one stupid conversation between a furry fucker and a living skeleton. Big sad. But hey, school's out so I've got some more free time now. Chapters should come out faster now, but that's just in theory. I did sit on writing the notes for this chapter for another hour so who knows. Enough rambling though, let's get into the chapter. We should see some actual work on the suits next chapter since this was a lot of setup for future events. This chapter had to do a lot of things so it was pulled in a lot of directions. Set up the suit's repair and creation routine, reintroduce us into Nezu while telling us what the principal's got going on right now, then deal with the repercussions of AFOVS OFA for Midoriya and Nezu. I severely underestimated just how much time I've had to give to focus on the repercussions of AFOVS OFA. I thought I could weave it into background details, and I'm still going to try to, but the main issue is that most of the repercussions are either very large so they need to be directly stated for minimal confusion, very obvious so I don't need to mention them at all, or don't affect Midoriya at all so I need to mention them with other characters. Poor planning on my part. I'm not sure I like my All Might. He's an annoying bland character right now, so I'll probably have to watch more of the anime and try to focus on him more if he comes up a lot. I'll definitely try to focus on him more so he'll be more of a character next time we meet him. Well, I think that's it on my end. This chapter had so many edits and redos that it probably never would have gotten released if I didn't say I was going to release a chapter on Monday. I definitely failed anyway, but here's hoping late's better than never. Now I've got some more research to do to make sure a chapter this messy doesn't happen again, so till next time, adios. Chapter 173. Chapter Summary. A nice slow chapter about Midoriya doing some maintenance on his kit. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. The school was dead quiet, almost completely vacant for the weekend. The staff were all gone without even the thought of returning till Monday, so Midoriya really did have the whole place to himself all day. There was no one and nothing that could interrupt his work. His hands moved slowly but steadily as he undid the stitch on his left gauntlet, leaning back in the chair. He was completely disconnected from the world as he worked, finding some genuine enjoyment in his actions. It was a bright and early morning, so early that the sun had yet to clear the horizon caked full of buildings. The sky was streaks of blues clashing with reds as the sun inched up, creating a painting in his window, but Midoriya didn't pay it any mind. He was busy removing the stitches, bolts, and wires that held together his gauntlet so he could examine the individual pieces. Well, he already finished removing the bolts and he could get to the wires yet, so for now he was pulling on loose threads to open the gauntlet up and start the real work. The metallic bone plates had come off easy enough, but now he was just dealing with the leather. Some of the bones were cracked and split, but the main weak point of the gauntlets had definitely been their leather base. He had never been an expert at handling leather. After all, he wasn't an expert at any of this. The first and second models had been good, but they could have been better. Revenant examined the wrist piece as he pulled on another snap thread, paying careful attention to the tears in the seams and damage to the leather itself. The concept had been solid, but with the amount of movement he did, the gloves just couldn't keep up. The gloves had been built to break someday, basically. They were his second pair and he just copied what he found in some sports equipment. Of course they weren't going to be great. It wasn't all terrible, it had a few good ideas sprinkled in there, but this was the perfect time to make some changes. The leather was tearing, even without my big finish. Midoriya mumbled to himself as he pulled out another broken string and added it to the pile. Same for the string. I probably didn't treat the leather right, but I could replace some of that with magic muscle. The magic muscle in question was, of course, his favorite possessed item, the bodysuit. It had become more than just a simple defensive item, it was a resource he could use to build new items from. That wasn't even counting its abilities to enhance his strength if used correctly. Seriously, and he thought Yamato had been broken. Gonna need to up my supply. Midoriya rubbed his chin, thinking hard. He had some spare magic muscle, kept in a storage locker from All for One, but between his first bodysuit, the arm Revenant made, and the bodysuit he'd make for Mao he might be running a little low. Plus, if he was gonna remake the gauntlets, might as well remake the boots too. He'd need to check how much supply he actually had in stock before he made anything, though. Maybe he should move it, too, since he got that storage locker from All for One. Revenant knew this great military base where he could probably store it, along with a ton of other questionable items that he acquired throughout the year. Maybe he could switch up the thread, too. Midoriya finished the arm guard, pulling out the last thread and focusing his attention on the handpiece. There were a lot of snaps and snags in the string he had used to hold this thing together. Eiko might have a few ideas about that. He'd have to bring that up on Monday. Midoriya put down the gauntlet and added a few more lines to his notebook. It was splayed out on the table next to him for Wei's access, so he could quickly jot down any passing thoughts before he forgot them. There was already a few ideas for changes to the gauntlets. Maybe he should try some gauntlets that cover his fingers, maybe he should get ones that cover his entire arm. They already made a full arm piece before, but only Revenant used it. Actually, that one was still intact. He'd have to dust it off when he was healthier and give it a try. And that was another thing to add to the notebook. He was on a roll. While the only thing Midoriya knew for certain about relaxing was that he didn't know Jack, he liked to imagine he was at least getting a little close. He was spending time doing something he enjoyed, he wasn't moving much, and he was pretty calm. If he was doing the thing he enjoyed most he'd be out on the streets fighting right that moment, but Midoriya knew enough about relaxing to guess that wouldn't help him recover. He pulled away from the desk, leaning back and moving his shoulders in small circles as he breathed out slowly. His body still felt stiff and achy from Mao's heavy workout, but it was a good ache. The kind that came from a good workout instead of the kind that came from a good ASS whooping. Of course, he had both. His stomach still hurt from the attacks he ate against some punks among many minor injuries he procured. Those injuries were probably the reason he was doing so badly recently. He spent his whole career acquiring fatigue and little injuries, but with his pain tolerance and stubborn his fanatic attitude towards heroism, he had always chosen to ignore the pain and keep moving. This had been boiling up until he fought the muscular villain and met his breaking point. Then, he had pulled one worse and surpassed his breaking point in the fight between All Might, All for One, and that woman. The female Nomu spelled most of the trouble. She tanked hard, hit harder, and definitely could have killed him. She probably would have, too, if medical personnel weren't on standby. He only pulled through because of equal parts adrenaline and pure luck. That was the point when his body couldn't take it anymore, but even then he still stood up to All for One and further damaged his body. Truly, he was too reckless. Now that he was sitting still, he could almost tell something was wrong. It was like something was draining the energy right out of him, constantly making him even more tired than he should have been. Midoriya massaged his neck as he leaned a little further back in the chair and stared at the ceiling, idly spinning his pencil between his fingers. He was supposed to be improving his tech right now, but there was no reason he couldn't also think about his body, right? Was just letting your mind wander randomly part of relaxing. His body had failed him against the female Nomu, sure, but that was just one situation and against someone as strong as All Might to boot. Trying to use her as a point of reference was like trying to judge body armor against rocket launchers. His body itself wasn't bad. Sure, he had gotten his ass kicked just one day ago by Mao in training and in sparring, but that had been after some pretty bad days. Even now he could tell that, while his physique didn't look amazing, he could still crush the average criminal in a one-on-one fight. His current problem with his body was that, just like his gauntlets, it couldn't hold up to the kind of stress he wanted to put it under. Ronin didn't fight one criminal at a time, he didn't even get to fight two at a time. Ronin had to deal with anywhere from 5 to 6 people at once, he had to take superhumans head-on, and he had to be a step ahead of the law at all times. Just as the number one hero should have been the pinnacle of heroism and All for One was the pinnacle of crime, Midoriya couldn't settle for being good. He had to go beyond his current limits and become the pinnacle of vigilantism. Yes, that did sound incredibly stupid, if anyone was wondering. All of that prattle was obvious and sounded nice, but the brass tacks were that he was still too weak. Worse, and to add insult to injury, he technically had a way to reach a higher state but he was too stupid and too weak right now to use it. Midoriya leaned forward and brought the front two legs of his chair sharply to the ground as he picked back up the mostly dismantled gauntlet. Through his efforts, a little bit of technical know-how, and a lot of trial and error, he could overcome the gap and reach some higher state if he bothered to stay focused and finished working on something, that was. One quick self-scolding later and he was back to work on the gauntlets. Taking them apart was the easy part, after all, especially with most of the wires split. It's amazing this thing didn't just explode on me. Midoriya carefully pulled the last wires apart, marveling at just how much had been destroyed. It was no wonder why his gauntlets and boots didn't work if they were all this bad, and it was more of a miracle that one of the gauntlets still worked enough to do anything. Revenant disconnected the wires entirely, setting aside what could be salvaged and tossing most of it. It seemed his initial damage estimates hadn't been accurate, it was likely most of his equipment was going to be rebuilt if just one of the gauntlets was anything to go off of. He then began to organize the piles he created into smaller sections. There was the big pile of junk, then the smaller sections for each individual material. The string, the wires, the leather, and now he pushed all of the possessed material together to form one pile. He'd probably just store up all the possessed material with the push quirk, then melt and reforge the metal parts himself. It didn't need to be hard, after all, it just needed to be sturdy and have the quirk. This also let him reshape the metal bits however he. Eyeing Tilda. Revenant stopped dead, blinking, then glanced down at the phone sitting on the desk. That was right, Inko Midoriya was supposed to call them sometime. Midoriya hadn't planned to head outside his room but changed his mind very early in the morning, well before his mother woke up. To make sure she didn't panic he left her a note to call him when she saw it. The sun had started to peek over the buildings as Midoriya quickly grabbed his phone, flipping it over to answer. Eyeing Tilda. A pair of initials shown on his screen. Just 2 letters, a contact that he never called. As a vigilante he had saved a few numbers to his phone just in case someone important ever called him so he'd know in advance. He didn't pick many, just a few he thought had a high chance might cause him problems, like Maruko's agency number, All Might's local agent, or worst of all. Midoriya just stared at the name for a second, then took a deep breath. He clicked answer halfway through the 3rd ring and held it up to his face, slumping into his chair as a wave of exhaustion blindsided him. He just sat there for a minute, taking nice slow breaths in and out. Just a nice, slow, steady pace. But he had to talk eventually. Midoriya licked his lips, noting just how dry they were before finally breaking the silence. Now, this was the first time they talked in a while, so he had to set the tone here. Hey, nailed it. Did I call the wrong number? I sure hope so. Revenant immediately got ready to hang up. So it is you. Sorry, you sounded a little different. The voice on the other end of the phone was as chipper as he remembered, and more annoying than words could describe. What do you want, Nezu? Revenant wanted to keep this brief, and not just because he had other things to do. Revenant just didn't like Nezu, plain and simple. What do I want? Why so serious? Can't we just chat? I'm hanging up if this isn't important. Hey, at least let me play a little. Click Tilda. Midoriya put the phone down, trading it for his second gauntlet. He had a lot of work to do and not enough time to deal with Nezu right now. Plus, he was pretty sure dealing with Nezu was the opposite of relaxing. Eyeing Tilda. Midoriya glanced at the phone. It was still Nezu calling, because of course it was, but if Nezu wanted to actually get to the point Midoriya was willing to hear him out. Midoriya leaned over, tapping the answer button again, then quickly tapped the speaker button so he could at least get some work done while he was putting up with Nezu. Hey. That was rude. And so is wasting my time. What do you want, Nezu? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Midoriya owed Nezu for the all-for-one fight when he probably saved Midoriya's life and definitely saved Ronin's identity. Well, someone had sent Midoriya anonymously to a hospital to tend to his injuries and cover his identity, it was just most likely to be Nezu. And the fact that Nezu was calling Midoriya's personal phone confirmed one of Midoriya's worst fears, that his identity had been compromised. On the other hand, Midoriya hadn't gotten arrested for vigilantism yet, so Nezu hadn't told the Hero Association yet for some reason. And whatever that reason was, it wasn't good for him. Nezu was probably calling to call in the favor and use his leverage against Midoriya to force him to do something. What, did Nezu want him to turn himself in? Fat chance. We don't have to get down to business immediately, I'm just trying to be friendly. How are you doing? The fact that Midoriya didn't know the reason why Nezu hadn't told the Hero Association combined with him not knowing why Nezu called was why Midoriya was so anxious to get down to brass tacks and get this over with. I'm alive and going to hang up again. What? Revenant moved his phone out of the way and rested the gauntlet against the table, doing a quick scan to figure out where he put his wrench and pliers. First, he'd remove the bolts, then the stitches, then it was back to wiring. I've got your costume here, I was wondering if you wanted to drop by sometime and pick it up. The guns were confiscated from criminals and probably illegal, the clothes are probably torn to bits, and everything else was garbage even before I stepped in. Why would I want any of it? Midoriya was genuinely confused why on earth anyone would want his first suit. It had been made of actual trash that he picked up on the job. Sports arm guards he stole, crappy shoes he spray-painted black, a torn-up old All Might hoodie. Alright, that hoodie might actually be worth something. But other than that his point still stood. Huh, guess you're not the sentimental type. Oh well, Nezu didn't let Midoriya's negativity weigh him down and kept trucking with no sign of stopping. You haven't been as active lately. Feeling under the weather. Injuries. That much was obvious so no harm in telling Nezu. Plus, if he was lucky, maybe he could play up just how injured he was and get the drop on anyone they sent to arrest him. Speaking of arresting him, Revenant quickly moved around the room and locked everything up in case of an attack. He didn't trust that furry fucker half the distance he could punt him, scheming rat he was. Oh, so you do have limits. He could hear Nezu laughing on the other end and couldn't help clicking his tongue in annoyance, sitting back down in his chair to continue working while the comedian kept talking. Glad to hear it, but talking to you like this is a little annoying, don't you think? Any conversation with you is annoying, Nezu. Ask your staff. Walk into that one. More laughter as Midoriya finished undoing the bolts, pushing the nuts, washers, and bolts into a bag so he wouldn't lose anything. He paid good money for those, he wasn't about to lose them because of some crazy mouse. But I want to meet you again. In person. We've got a lot to discuss and I wouldn't want to do it over the phone. And there it was. The mind games were over as Nezu started to tip his hand. This was probably a trap, but Revenant couldn't he shouldn't outright say no. Technically he could always say no, but he was in no condition right now to back up those words. With Nezu's new leverage, Revenant's options were becoming more limited. Having 2 identities was limiting, especially when one was supposed to be secretive. Now Revenant was starting to get some perspective on why most heroes didn't bother with it these days. I'd like to meet you as soon as possible. Do you have some time later today? You could swing by, meet me at my office, we have a nice chat. No, Midoriya was quick to shoot down that idea. Meeting inside UA, Nezu's home turf. And doing it while he was so weak. It was unthinkable. Next week. While Midoriya couldn't outright say no, he could reshape the terms. He wasn't saying that he wouldn't meet Nezu, he was just saying that he wouldn't meet Nezu right now. By giving him a time frame of when he could meet, he would hopefully give himself a little time to shape up and get ready. Sure, Nezu would also get this time to prepare, but Midoriya needed that time a lot more than Nezu did. Next week. Why? Your injury's that bad? Sure, Revenant didn't bother trying to deny it, rubbing his head to try and ease pounding in his skull. But I'll come to UA next week. I'll be there at 10. Got it. 10:00 Saturday. Alright, well, it was great hearing from. Click Tilda. Midoriya moved away from the phone and the desk, leaning back as he ran his hands through his hair and took several deep breaths. Shit. Revenant leaned back a little further, chewing the last few minutes over in his head. Shit. Midoriya took some potshots at the upcoming week, trying to figure out just how this was going to go as he leaned back a little too far and his chair tipped out from under him. Pipe. Chapter end notes. Yo, hitting y'all with a quick chapter to ruin all of Midoriya's plans again because the only thing consistent in this story is that nothing Midoriya thinks through will ever work. Now, let's walk through this. We finally get to the core of Midoriya's biggest nerf in this second season, even if Midoriya only mentions it by accident, his energy aka the shards of Yamato stuck in him. Midoriya's original big points were his high pain tolerance, his willingness to do repeat things, and his endurance. With Yamato stealing his energy, his endurance took some big hits, hence all his new problems. Hope this makes sense. We're going to go into this in the story itself eventually, but Midoriya isn't even aware that he has Yamato shards in him, so that's a long way away. This in the last chapter had a lot of time dedicated to showing people's mental spaces. Midoriya's just got done realizing that he's got some serious nerfs for some mysterious reason and so is naturally suspicious of everyone and everything, like a certain furry fucker who could very casually spell the end of Ronin. I don't like stories that hinge on misconceptions and a lack of communication, but since this isn't a comedy I hope it feels more at home here. Maybe someday Midoriya can get what he wants and have some nice quiet time to himself to work. That doesn't make for an interesting read, so guess somebody's gonna keep fucking it all up. Till we meet again, adios. Chapter 174. Chapter summary. Midoriya has a fun time. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya lay on the floor of his school's crafting club room, taking slow breaths as he rubbed his face. He raised his head slightly, looking at the table and the phone resting atop it. He'd just gotten off the phone with Nezu, principal of UA High School and a member of the Hero Association board. He just hung up on Nezu, one of the board members of the Hero Association, an international organization that had shaped heroism into what it was today. He was going to meet Nezu, the biggest wildcard he'd ever had to deal with, in 1 week. Midoriya let his head fall to the floor again, wincing slightly as his skull bounced off the ground again. Shit. She glanced down at her phone as she climbed the apartment steps, checking the address one last time. Apartment 425, Building 2. It hadn't changed since the last time she looked at it, but she still kept reading and rereading it like the numbers would slide around if she didn't pay attention. She was almost to the top floor when she stopped, checking the room numbers before getting off the stairwell and moving down the open hall. The day was young but hot already, and it felt great. She could never get enough warmth and it put some real oomph in her step. Whatever that meant, she picked that one up from her dad. She pointed towards each of the doors as she moved down the hall before doubling back, having gone the wrong way. The numbers were supposed to go up, not down. This was the right floor, right? She didn't want to knock on a stranger's door and have to talk to someone she never met. The large woman stopped herself and took a deep breath, then checked the address on her phone one last time. Google Maps might not know where his apartment was, but it did know the number. She was just going to go up and say hi. There was nothing to be worried about. Right. She looked over at one of the doors, then down at her phone and back again. That was the door, apparently. It said 425, and there was no reason to doubt it. A plain brown door, just like the rest in the row. Simple and undetailed, save for the numbers she was looking for. And it still looked really, really scary. And big. And scary. One last deep breath before Eiko straightened up, clutching her phone with white knuckles, then. Tap tap tilde. Midoriya had been trying to relax, but after his call with Nezu that was pretty much impossible. Just thinking about meeting that furry fucker set his nerves on edge, there was no way he could enjoy himself now. But that wasn't a good reason to stop working. If anything, the fact that he had to meet Nezu was a good reason to double down on his work. He had to fix his suit in time now, he had to be prepared. If he wasn't prepared and things went wrong, that was on him. Revenant didn't have a clue what Nezu was planning. He could never get into that rodent's head, never quite see where it was all going. He didn't know why Nezu hadn't turned him in, he didn't know why Nezu wanted to speak to him in person, and there was nothing that could change that. It was too late to wish for something else, so now it was time to act while he still had the chance. Damn it. Midoriya rose off the ground, scowling as he rubbed the back of his head. He knew this day was probably coming the first time he went out on the streets with just a stupid pipe, the first time he acted as a vigilante to save people, but now that the day was here. He picked his chair off the ground and set it in front of the table again, then sat down. He surveyed the table, eyeing the work he had left. He was still disassembling his gauntlets, he didn't even have any fixed tech yet. He had days of work, maybe weeks before his gear would be back in working shape. Damn it. Midoriya hit the table in annoyance before pulling forward and picking up the unfinished gauntlet, beginning to work immediately. He had a lot of work to do so he needed to start quickly. There was no substitute for putting in the time, but that was time he didn't have. For just the gauntlets he still needed to create the new models. He had to plan it out in his notebook, he had to make the prototype from normal leather, he had to make the real version, and then he had to configure the wiring and test it out. Who knew if it had even worked correctly before then, damn it. He had to focus on the work in front of him, but he also needed to think ahead. He needed time to work but he needed to get this done quickly. It was a whole bunch of fucking paradoxes that went nowhere, just another pain in his ass. He breathed in and out slowly as he took apart the gauntlet stitch by stitch. Grabbing thread, then pulling thread, grabbing the next thread, pulling the next thread, grabbing thread, pulling thread, grabbing, pulling, grabbing, pulling. Damn it, Midoriya spoke through clenched teeth as his head pounded from falling out of his chair. His pulse was rapid, his breathing was oddly off, he was sweating and he didn't know why, damn it. Midoriya slammed his hand into the table in agitation, taking in deep breaths to try and calm himself down. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Midoriya stood suddenly and kicked at his chair, hitting his shin and launching the chair across the room as he made a fool of himself over nothing. There was nothing to do, this accomplished nothing, but... God damn it. Midoriya screamed as he punted the table, barely moving it while he reeled back with his now hurt foot. He pushed through the pain to stand, practically snarling as he ran his hands through his hair. He paced the room for a minute, just trying fruitlessly to ease the pounding in his head and the worries in his heart. Slow but deep breaths echoed through the empty school as Midoriya came back down, slumping in the middle of the room. He fell on his ass and grabbed his head, still taking those slow deep breaths that didn't seem to do a thing to his rapid pulse or pulsing headache. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, fighting against the mess in his head before he looked around the room. His tantrum barely did anything. A knocked-over chair, a slightly scooted table, and an aching in his leg were the only signs of Midoriya's outburst. It really was pathetic. He looked back at the desk, back at the phone, and back at his unfinished gauntlet. He was just wasting time, putting off the work he needed to do. He was supposed to be relaxing, but instead he was hurting more than when he came in. He really was pathetic. He took one last deep breath, then winced as he leaned forward and put weight on his now sore leg. He couldn't just sit back. He couldn't just mope. There was work to do, and someone had to do it. Damn it. Midoriya was back in the chair, back at the table, and back at it again as he continued to pull apart the gauntlet. His usual focus was shaken by something he couldn't understand, like there was a nagging in the back of his head. Did Nezu really get to him that much? Nezu called him, so that meant Nezu knew who they really were. But that much was obvious. Someone had taken them to the hospital and given them a cover story, so someone had figured out who they really were. Someone powerful if they could cover everything up. It just turned out that someone was Nezu. There were worse people to find out than Nezu. Probably, he couldn't think of any, but he guessed most of the Hero Association didn't like him. They'd arrest him on the spot probably for vigilantism even if he technically never committed anything legally considered modern vigilantism. No, that was just semantics. While modern vigilantism was classified as using your quirk, that point barely mattered. He had real problems with Nezu, namely, he couldn't understand what Nezu wanted to do with him. He was repeating himself. He listed the problem at least 3 times, and it wasn't changing. He didn't know why Nezu let him go, he didn't know why Nezu called him in, he just didn't get Nezu. Theorizing would do nothing, so it was best instead to focus on their work. Didn't he say that once to someone? Yeah, he was pretty sure he said that to somebody. Was it Kaminari? It was probably Kaminari. This didn't matter either. Midoriya leaned back, rubbing his face. His attention was all over the place today. His usual level of focus was in as bad a shape as his gauntlets, work was difficult, and getting any relaxation in today was out of the question. Maybe he should get something to eat. Take a minute to cool his head, get something to eat, then come back and get some more work done. Yeah, that could work. What time was it? Midoriya picked up his phone, turning it on to check the time. 10:51, too late for breakfast and too early for lunch. Top that with the queasiness in his stomach and he wouldn't be eating for a while, but he could still pick something up to eat. But what to get? He didn't want anything greasy, so a burger was out. He needed to get this to go, so nothing that was dine-in only. A sandwich could work. It was cheap, filling, and it could be eaten cold. Yeah, a sandwich sounded just fine. Now where to get it from? Subday, Jeffrey's Deli, Joni Jim's, they all sold practically the same thing. The only difference was how many times they'd make him repeat his order, and maybe how close they were. Midoriya never actually ate around here, so he didn't know which would be the closest. Goggle did, though, so that was just one quick search. Midoriya's food fiasco was put on pause as he noticed that he had several unread messages. Someone must have sent them after Nezu called, so was it just more stuff from the furry fucker or someone else? Was it his mom this time? Midoriya debated between leaving the messages unread and finding out who wanted him and settled on checking the messages. Even if it was from Nezu, it would probably be best to just see what the furry fucker wanted instead of letting that rodent thing get into his head more. He opened up the line to see over 30 new messages all from one person, but not Nezu. Thank God. All the messages were instead from Eiko for some reason. Midoriya furrowed his brow, flipping through the messages with one hand as he began to put his vigilante equipment away. Hi Mito, hello M. Salutadio. There were 10 more messages like that. It was like someone kept hitting send instead of backspace or whatever the equivalent was on a phone. Back arrow, technically. Whatever. Midoriya put down the phone to shut all his equipment into one box, sealing it up and shoving it into his hiding spot before he went for the door and picked his phone back up along the way. Midoriya scrolled past the weird messages to check if the later stuff made more sense. How'd I unsend a message? H. Then he scrolled past the technical problems, trying to stifle the slightly mean-spirited smirk on his face. Hey Midoriya, I got your message, where are we meeting up? My message. Midoriya blinked, rereading the text just to make sure he got that right. Eiko got his message. What message? He didn't send any message, he was busy having an existential crisis about his identity getting leaked. Should he send a response? The message was about 40 minutes old, but did he want to respond? He had stuff to do. He probably should respond and just tell her he was busy. Midoriya tapped his phone to start writing the message with one hand as he reached the door, pulling it open. Oh. As he opened the door to leave, Eiko stood on the other side, arms still extended as she reached to open the same door. She stood there surprised for a second before breaking into a small smile and giving him a little wave. Hey Midoriya. Oh yeah, he forgot. God hated him. Chapter end notes. Yo, we're back again once again to show Midoriya and his tough times. Turns out coping mechanisms are pretty cool, especially the healthy ones. Also, fast facts, just compartmentalizing everything doesn't work all the time. Big oops all around. I'm a big advocate of interesting writing over realistic writing, but I think that this could be a good direction to go in. I am an expert in being stressed out after all, so this should be my home field. Besides, this could be my most interesting arc of all. The big villain isn't just someone Midoriya can slash, it isn't even something Midoriya can hit. If I do this right, this could be pretty cool, and maybe I'll even work out some stuff along the way. This could be fun. It was enjoyable to take a step back and work on the Eiko section as a nice break, just a little injection as we see someone else stressed out about something a little smaller than their secret identity being leaked. It's still a big deal to her though, so it's still a fun moment that explores some of her character. I think the biggest thing I learned from this chapter was that I still have a lot of exploring to do with these characters. We've seen a lot of Midoriya, but he's not done yet. He acts calm and in control, but the dude's just 15 years old. He's got a lot going on and the simplest part of his life is the fighting, but now he can't fight. It's time to explore what Midoriya isn't good at. It's time for Midoriya to learn a few lessons. It's time for me to go. Thanks for sticking around through this little spell. It wasn't fun to write, but it was very enlightening for me. Stay Gucci my dudes and dudettes. Adios. Chapter 175. Chapter summary. Midoriya has an actually fun time. For real this time. Chapter notes. Note to moron, edit again to fix dialogue when you get back. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Midoriya was mad, but not at Eiko. They walked out of the school, scarcely talking since they bumped into each other at the crafting club room. It was a nice day out, yes, a very nice day out. Midoriya was mad at the world. With so many frustrations piling up and so many things getting in his way, he felt like he'd need the patience of Buddha to stay calm. First his injuries, then repairs for his suits, add in the call with Nezu and now Eiko. Today was just not going his way. Did you see the forecast today, Midoriya? Eiko called out from behind him, her joy evident. She wore a plain pair of cargo shorts, a soft pink jacket, and a blue shirt. It was the least amount of layers he could recall her ever wearing. Her hair was pulled back, covering most of her face still while a bit of her mouth peeked through to show a small smile. Midoriya wasn't mad at Eiko, but he definitely didn't want her here. He wanted to be alone so he could keep grinding away on fixing his mess of a costume. He needed to get it done before he met Nezu no matter how confused and disorientated he was, but he didn't want to work on the suit around Eiko. Yes, something like a high of 37 degrees, correct? Maybe even 38. Do you prefer Fahrenheit? Revenant kept the small talk going and replied with a mirror of her smile. Midoriya was preoccupied with other things, so it looked like he'd be taking charge of this. Annoying but doable. Eiko might have been the daughter of Mao, criminal superstar extraordinaire or whatever, but Eiko seemed as invested and into the villain lifestyle as Endeavor was in filling anyone with hope. Not his snappiest line, but it got the point across. Doesn't matter, I checked the weather too. Eiko beamed again, walking slowly behind him as she inspected the streets. The streets were lively this time of day in spite of the heat as the pair slipped further from the rundown section of the school and into a better part of town with stores. Eiko wasn't a part of that world and held no interest in it, and that was fine. Hell, that was a way better decision overall, but it meant he couldn't really do vigilante stuff while he was with her. He wanted to turn her offer to hang out or whatever down back at the school, but... Thanks again for coming with me. Eiko herself cut to the core of the issue as she moved a little faster to catch up to him, still staying tucked firmly behind him. He seemed to have a very hard time telling people off these days, and given her expression at the time, he found it very difficult to say no. This ability could be useful, he should try to learn and replicate it quickly. Course. I needed a break anyway, so you came just at the right time. He had given in for spending time Maruko, he'd given in for training Kaminari, and now he'd given in for whatever this was with Eiko. He really was a softie. He checked his phone once again as he headed towards the sandwich shop Eiko recommended. Eiko lived pretty close to the school in this shopping district, so it wasn't surprising she knew the area and had a few favorites. Midoriya still wondered about a few things, though, and they weren't related to food. Eiko said she got his message, but Midoriya never sent any messages, so what was she talking about? Thank goodness. Eiko pulled a few stray hairs from her face then took another sudden step, hiding behind Midoriya as some large gruff men passed by. She picked up where she left off only after they passed, still fiddling with her hair. I was kind of worried my dad was just pulling my leg when he said you wanted to meet up today. Ah, and just like that, with just the slightest nudge in the right place, the pieces began to tumble into place. Quote. I see. Yeah, he kept repeating something about relaxation. I didn't get it. Eiko was a little less self-conscious as she tried to remember what her father, Mao, had told her. And then jumped when she realized she stopped dead in the middle of an intersection, hurrying quickly across to keep out of trouble. I'm sorry. Midoriya took a deep breath as he got his head on straight and followed the now running Eiko. Hearing the backstory on this was going to be fun. So your dad delivered my message, right? Did any details crop up, any problems? Midoriya threw a line straight out there after Eiko slowed down, just fishing for some juicy details. Anything so he could get an idea of what Mao had done or said would have been great, but he wasn't expecting much. Oh, Dad forgot to tell me about your message until this morning at breakfast. Was I late? I'm so sorry if I was late. Eiko worked herself into a frenzy as her anxiety took hold, already apologizing over what was, quite literally, absolutely nothing. You weren't late, Eiko, slow down. You had plenty of time, I was just showed up early and was killing some time. Midoriya gave a half-hearted wave and a vague statement to try and ease her nerves. Plus, the statement doubled as a cover story for what he'd been doing in the club room. Oh, thank goodness. So what were you doing in the crafting room, Midoriya? Oh, did you want to do some club activities over the weekend? Eiko pressed straight into the weakest point of his argument in defense, clapping her hands together in excitement while turning to face him. She really had a knack for poking holes in his stories, this was almost impressive. He'd been doing something in the room to pass time for waiting for her, but what had he been doing? And if he called Eiko to meet him in the club room, that obviously meant he had something he wanted to do in the club room with her, right? They were a crafting club after all. How did he answer that question without mentioning exactly what he'd been working on? It was a pretty reasonable question since she thought Midoriya wanted to hang out with her. Better though, it was a pretty safe question to answer. Midoriya rubbed his head, thinking momentarily about the things he still had to do. He still had to finish dismantling that second gauntlet before he could even work on making a new gauntlet, and when he finished that he had to start planning the new one. From there he had to build the prototype. So your big problem is you want to make something, but you're having trouble. Eiko's question surprised Midoriya almost as much as her sudden appearance at the door just 20 minutes ago, especially paired with how genuine her expression was. Quote. I suppose so, yeah. I've got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. Alright, I'll help you. Huh, Midoriya felt like he was lagging behind with how often he was getting surprised these days. It didn't seem to take much to throw him off his game, it seemed. You'll help me. Why yeah, Eiko's first interjection was fresh with confidence, but now she was sounding more like her usual self. Well, I'll try my best. 'Cause that's the point of the club. We help each other and we make stuff together. Alright, Eiko rubbed her head, growing more unsure and nervous with every word, almost all confidence gone by the end. She shot him a sidelong glance to try and find a little confirmation, then began to backpedal at Midoriya's silent reaction, both literally and metaphorically. I mean if it's not getting I'm not getting in the way. I don't want to cause you trouble. He didn't react at all visibly to her words, stopping dead on the sidewalk so they didn't get further apart. Hey, Eiko. Why ye? Eiko squirmed as he quietly turned towards her, her gaze flitting around the room as she played with her hair. Yes. A few words flitted through his head as he contemplated what to say, but Revenant settled on the simplest answer, locking eyes to be a bit more genuine with his friend. Thanks. From both of us. Oh, no problem. Eiko rubbed the back of her head as they walked down the street, almost missing a step from her nerves. It's nothing, really. Not to me, but this has been pretty heavy for just a walk. Come on, Midoriya said as they rounded the corner, finally reaching the sandwich shop. Let's get something to eat. Just 15 minutes later and the two friends were back at their club room. Midoriya closed the door behind them, thoughts still lingering on his project and how much he was going to say. He didn't want to tell or show Eiko everything, so what should they work on together? The boots, the gauntlets. They stole their jacket from Mao, her dad, so that was out. They just couldn't fix the helmet, so that was out. No weapons either. So this is what you were working on. This stuff's pretty detailed. Eiko called out to him, cutting his dilemma down as he was pulled from his thoughts. What he was working on? Midoriya's gaze snapped up, taking in the whole room quickly to make sure he didn't leave any of his costume parts out like an idiot, but no, it was all tucked away out of sight. The table was empty save for a few things he brought in himself, like his leatherworking tools and some empty plastic bottles, so what was Eiko talking about? The design's pretty complex, I don't think we can do all of this today. Eiko was examining something on the table, but what? Midoriya walked over and put his sandwich down. He was a goddamn moron. Sitting out in the open on the table, clear as day, was Hero Analysis for the Future number 14, still turned open to their page on Ronin. Well, that settled it. He was losing his edge. Of all the stuff he forgot to put away. No way we can do all that today. Midoriya tossed his sandwich onto the table and moved over to the cabinets. If she already saw that there was no point in hiding the actual clothes, but if he played this right. Those drawings are old. They don't matter anymore here. Midoriya opened the bottom of the cabinet then slid the false bottom over, picking up a large box that he put there just an hour ago. He brought the box slowly over to the table, dropping it roughly on the table in reach of Eiko so she could see what was in it. He then opened the box as Eiko put down her sandwich, giving him her full attention as he began to pull out his costume piece by piece. Eiko examined the clothes slowly and carefully, being extra careful with how torn up they were in comparing them to the drawings. The jacket, the boots, the pants. How long did it take to make all of this? Eiko was amazed by the level of detail, holding up a belt to see it better in the dim light. She had great vision in the dark, but it was still impressive just to see how much effort had gone into something as small as a belt. About a month, but that was after a lot of revisions. Midoriya answered absent-mindedly as he placed a second box on the table and flipped it open, then pulled out a strange chunk of metal. It's been a while, maybe half a year for this one in total. Wow, she thought back on the longest project she'd done, a stuffed octopus that she greatly underestimated. Those tentacles were way more complicated than she thought. She brought that one in and Midoriya gave her a hand with it too. Now she focused on the entire thing as it was assembled on the table, tracing the strange scratches and tears with a finger. They didn't seem to be a part of the design since they weren't in the drawing. Accident. Bear. Midoriya didn't seem too concerned as he sat down and began to unwrap his sandwich. That camping stuff that made me miss the first few days of school. Ooh, I remember that. Eiko nodded, then turned back to the clothing. She inspected the jacket, running her thumb along the leather as it became burned, scorched, and then torn apart. Scary bear. It wasn't just a bear, but yeah, pretty scary bear. Midoriya explained it a bit, doing a weird spinning hand motion like he was trying to go on, then gave up halfway through and focused again on his food. We should have gotten drinks. What did I do with the water? So what did you want to do? Eiko glanced at Midoriya as he got up again, grabbing his bag and rummaging through it while Eiko held up the tangled mess that had once been some kind of coat. I don't think anyone could fix this. Well, maybe Best Jeanist could. Yup, fixing that mess is a waste. Midoriya placed a large water bottle beside her, put his own water bottle down, then sat down again. That stuff's too damaged, so not gonna try. Gotta make a whole new one from scratch. Oh, that makes sense. Eiko nodded, playing with the water bottle Midoriya had given her. How do we do that though? I mean, there's so much stuff, where do we even start? Simple. Midoriya cut her rambling short and took her by surprise with the strength in his voice. She turned to look at him and was met by a small yet confident smile as he played with his own water bottle before setting it down, tapping his partially wrapped sandwich. First, we eat. Oh, right, then. Midoriya finished unwrapping his sandwich and flicked his gaze knowingly towards the notebook on the table, covered with intricate drawings and measurements. We plan. Eiko nodded along and went to take a bite of her own sandwich alongside him, instead chewing on the wax paper covering it. Oomph. Ku Fiba. The pair spent the next hour eating and talking about the clothing, trying to settle on what to start with. Eiko wanted to start with one article of clothing at a time while Midoriya wanted to try everything at once. In the end they took Eiko's way, if just because everything had to start with something. Midoriya didn't have any jackets right now. He made one from possessed material, but that was the shredded one currently lying on the table in front of them. Mao's jacket, for once, was gone. He'd brought it to fight All for One, so it was part of the clothing that went missing. Even though it was missing, Midoriya had the idea that a certain fucker, who may or may not be furry, knew where it was. He could try to get Mao's jacket when he swung by, so no reason to try and make a new one. Yet, he could face that problem in a week. He already started the gauntlets, but those were a little complicated, so it was better to skip those and work on their matching set, the boots. Boots didn't have little finger things to cover, wrist mobility, or... No, that was it. Only 2 reasons made them better than the rest, but 2 reasons were good reasons to start with them. Now they were on their phones, trying to pick a design for the boots based on Midoriya's scribbles and his own bad description of tall boots, whatever that meant. Tall boots, tall boots. Have you worn a lot of tall boots, Midoriya? I think I had some tall rain boots in elementary school, but that was it. Oh, and the ones on the table. Oh, what got you into them? Mobility. Midoriya didn't really get to explain his costume much, he never needed to, but if they were working together to try and design a new set of boots, he probably should give a little more detail than that. That, and him wearing tall boots with no explanations, might send a few signals. The boots themselves went slightly above the knee and came equipped with several straps to tie them to his body. The long body of the boot and the straps, these straps help the boot stay in place while moving. It also keeps water out, keeps my pants out of the way, and gives good support to my ankle and knee. Oh, and it's pretty warm. He offered the boot to Eiko and pointed to each part as he spoke, explaining what it was for. Eiko nodded along as he talked, following along in her head. That's a lot of stuff for just one boot. Well, I suppose that's why boots come in pairs. Besides, that's just why I want my boots to be tall. There were a few other intricacies about the boots he wanted, but he wasn't sure how many of those he was going to knock out right now. He would just settle for something that worked before he got picky. Eiko decided to be the bigger woman and focus on his words, only snickering at his stupid pair joke. You want mobility, so no big heels. I don't think we're going to find a boot like that on the internet, Midoriya. Most of these are for like, models and stuff. Oh, I like those. One sec, gonna save that. Yeah, we don't have the stuff to make the bottom of a shoe either, so I'll probably just buy some regular boots and steal the soles from them. Midoriya took a second to look at the current sketch they had. A blob in the shape of a leg that went up to the thigh. It was pretty rough. He took this time to add in the straps that would secure the boot to the belt, then added the belt that these boots were supposed to get strapped to. That might be a little important to remember. You're gonna be camping with these, right? Eiko was right beside him, taking this chance to lose herself in her work as she brushed some hair out of her face to better see the scribbles. You might want a military harness belt to strap them into. My dad has a few that wouldn't fit, but we can get some rough ideas with them. I'll ask to borrow a few. Thanks. Midoriya was grateful both for her help and the fact that she basically gave him an alibi for free of what he was doing with this stuff. I'm gonna try to do some climbing with them, so the belt will be used for a lot of stuff. A military belt would be pretty useful. Climbing. Eiko cut him off quickly, tapping the soles on the paper. We better be careful when we pick the soles then. They'll have to be a little flexible, so you better try some hiking ones, but why wouldn't you? After all, you've been hiking before. Eiko trailed off. It was strange how casually she said we, how easy it was to say. A few hours ago he'd been ripping his hair out, trying to get to grips with what he'd have to do and how he was going to do. Now time was flying by without a single concern as they thought about how to make a pair of really stupid-looking shoes. So the plan's coming out pretty well. I'll refine it later when I got the time, Midoriya said as he cast an appraising eye over their scribblings. Thanks again for the help. I'm glad I could help. Eiko stopped playing with her water bottle and straightened out, nodding a few times before she cooled off and relaxed a touch. I mean, it's pretty fun. I think I like this stuff. Even if I'm not great at it. Revenant looked at the stick figures they use for people and blobs for boots, shrugging. Well, you're trying, so that's better than most. Yeah, Eiko smiled again, setting the water bottle down. Midoriya wondered if she always smiled this much and he just didn't notice it. Midoriya started to pack things up and check the time. 4:53. He had plenty of time to get more work done at his own home. Midoriya paused, putting the boxes in the cabinet for a second, glancing back. Hey, Eiko. She glanced up from the table, still smiling. She helped them so much, so it only made sense to pay her back, right? You need to be anywhere. Oh, I need to be home by 7. My mom's out, so my dad's buying dinner tonight. Eiko seemed very excited about it, her smile growing a step as she stood up. Why? Oh, is something wrong? No, it's nothing. Just. Midoriya shoved the boxes into the cabinet and dropped the false bottom over top, standing and wiping his hands off on his pants. You helped a lot, and I wanted to pay you back a little. Wanna go hit a mall, or something on the way home? Really? Eiko's head snapped over, her excitement evident and on full display again. Seemed she did smile a lot. Wanna go back to the park? With the ducks. That one was really fun. Oh, and we can go to the fabric store for the boots too. Do you have time for both? Midoriya glanced at the cabinet with his equipment one last time, peering at a certain broken mask that he rested atop the false bottom because he hadn't brought it out so Eiko couldn't see it. His gaze lingered on it for just a moment. Should be pretty fun. Let's do it. He gently shut the doors and turned away, picking up his stuff before the two walked out of the room. Maybe just for one day vigilantism could wait, just for a bit, while Midoriya learned to smile like Eiko. Chapter end notes. Yo man, what's editing? Work's hard. Thinking's hard. I'm tired. Let's do this. The chapter was written in a very particular and bad style where I wrote the outline by planning out the beats I wanted to happen in my head, the same style I have for writing an overarching story, then just writing whatever popped into my head between those moments. Whenever I came to a point I didn't know what to do, I skipped to the next part one did, creating this very choppy, start and stop, kind of feel. Really weird feeling, NGL. When I was writing and skipping it felt great. I just drop a parenthesis down, put whatever's supposed to go here that I'm skipping in it, then move on to the next point I didn't know. Wrote this whole chapter like that just to try it out, right, and it felt great. I got the moments I wanted, hit the beats I thought were important, but then I had to go back and patch up the skips. As it turns out, I just hate editing. No big surprise to me, I've known that for a while, but this writing style basically requires editing to work because filling in the missing chunks is editing. Then when I'm done adding the chunks, I've got to go back, reread the whole chapter, and edit it a second time to edit in the chunks so it flows better and more naturally. All in all, this style's good, but fuck this style of writing. Hey, I also learned my one thing for the day. I hate this writing style. Let's talk less about that and more about what happens in this mess. Joke's on me, I can't. So I just ramble. I always listen to music while I'm writing to put me in the right mood. Not a writing mood, but the same mood as the characters in the scene. Bar scenes I do jazz, fight scenes I bust out the heavier stuff, but I just can't get anything for the echo stuff. So I threw my hands up and put on 8 hours of nature sounds, slapped some Coldplay and 5 for fighting on, then made this. Who knows how it went? Some stuff in character. I wanted to have more of a leitmotif with Midoriya and his work, but that just fell through. It's fun to look back and see what just didn't work, the stuff that got left on the cutting room floor. So instead we get a callback to the mask in the closet from when Midoriya argued with Wraith, which I'd argue was a better callback even if not as many people get it. It's a fun theme that I only thought to use because my original plans fell through, so guess it's good that the light stuff didn't work. Whatever. Besides that, we get some time with Eiko doing her best to be a good friend while Midoriya tries to be normal for just a bit. I think there's some good banter in Midoriya covering up his vigilante stuff as badly as possible, but I'm a nutcase. Who knows? This was fun. I missed crafting chapters even if no one else did, where I can just delve in. I really like exploring power systems, and Ronin's power system is the items, so it feels good to just jump in and explore an item we didn't get to last time. We're also gonna see Midoriya working it into a possessed item soon, but you have to start somewhere and these boots are where it'll all begin. The dialogue was rough. You can really feel how stilted it is when I'm writing for beats, I think. It had to fill the gaps between chunks, making it even rougher than normal, but that's what editing is for. I guess. Who knows, I suck at editing, but these notes are kinda long and that's nice. It's been a while since I had notes run like this. Been a while since I've had so much fun writing. I 100% blame the nature sounds. I'm gonna keep doing this. This is it then, so I'ma just hit the chapter with one last edit, post, and bail for bed. Hope ya enjoyed my mess, thanks for sticking through the cringe, and adios. Chapter 176. Chapter Summary. A montage of Midoriya's day as the author gets sick of writing peaceful scenes, but can't stop because of story flow. Big sad. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya and Eiko's day went pretty quick after working in the club room. Going to a mall and looking at more boots in person, going to a park to look at the ducks, going to a store to pick up bread, going to a very familiar park and throwing bread at the ducks, accidentally hitting a duck in the face, then getting chased around the park. Good times all around. Now, tired and tuckered out, the two kids sat on a park bench as the sun slipped between the skyscrapers and apartments. The world was dyed hues of red and orange in the slowly dimming light, but still warm and oddly comfortable still as stars began to creep out behind them. Midoriya lay against the bench, splayed out and breathing heavily from one of the most exhilarating and dumb chases in his life. Eiko sat beside him, leaning forward as she focused on her phone, flicking through the pictures she'd taken that day and smiling all the while. You had fun. Midoriya peeled himself off the bench and leaned forward to match Eiko, running a hand through his mane of hair. He hadn't cut it in a while and this summer heatwave was doing a pretty good job convincing him to get it snipped. Why yeah. Eiko stumbled for a bit before repeating herself with a little more confidence, sitting a little straighter as she affirmed herself. Did you want some of the pictures? Sure, just send them through the line whenever you've got a minute. Midoriya put his hands on his knees and stood, standing straight while he stretched. His body still felt sore, but after the chaos of the day, it somehow felt a little better. When he was done stretching out, he grabbed his phone and checked the time. Just before 6:30. You have to be home by 7, right? You better get going soon if you want to make it on time. Huh, really OH. Eiko blinked for a few seconds before she noticed the time on her own phone and almost literally jumped up from the bench. I'm sorry, I've got to go. Thank you again. It was fun. Eiko shouted as she bowed sharply, then glanced around to get her bearings before bolting towards one of the park exits. See you Monday, Tilda. Midoriya stood fixed, shaking his head slightly as Eiko ran across the park while waving goodbye sporadically, taking a second to get his bearings before he returned Eiko's wave. There was no reason for her to be in such a rush. She'd get home before 7 easily at her current pace, but she seemed to worry a lot, even more than him. It seemed to be a part of her nature for better or for worse. Midoriya stopped waving like an idiot eventually and took a second to really soak in the scenes of the park on his own. The gentle lapping of the pond, the breeze running through the few trees, even the quacking of those stupid ravenous ducks seemed calming now. The city was astir with life around the park. The dull murmur of people mingled with the chirping of the birds, the smell of cut grass tinged by delicious foods, it all came together for just a moment. And a few moments, a few precious seconds, this was it. For just a few heartbeats there was nothing past this. Children played in the grass, friends talked on the sidewalk, businesses ran on the streets. In that small window of time there were no worries, just a strange kind of peace. But that time couldn't last forever, just as Midoriya couldn't stay there forever. The court chill of the breeze against his neck and the aches in his legs pulled him out of it and brought him back into reality. But it wasn't gone. Midoriya took a few steps to work his legs, then stopped again to listen once more. It was still there. That loud kind of peace was still there. The children still played, the friends still talked, and the businesses were still running. The smell of food still floated across the air with the scent of cut grass, the birds still chirped, and the city was still lively. Even if Midoriya didn't always notice it, the peace was there, still going on. He didn't get it. He didn't feel like a part of it as he took it in, but he liked it. At least, he thought he liked it, and that was probably pretty good. Even if he didn't get it. Midoriya started to walk out of the park himself when he kicked something, a large stick that had been lying next to the bench. It wasn't that large, only about 3 feet long at most, but it was fairly straight and in his way. Midoriya moved to kick it out of his way before he paused, thinking for a second. It wasn't like it would actually help or do anything, but Midoriya pushed his foot underneath the branch, paused for a little adjustment, then kicked the stick into the air. He took a slight step back to get a better view, keeping his eyes trained on the flying stick before he jumped back in and pawed at the stick, snatching it out of the air. Midoriya looked at the stick in his hand, flipping it once then swinging it around with one hand, moving it this way and that. To the side, up then down, in all sorts of directions as he got a feel for it. His grip shifted from one-handed to two as he planted his feet, pulling the stick back beside his head as he breathed in slowly, glancing one last time at the stick before he looked ahead and ha! He breathed out as he sprung forward, swinging the stick down in a familiar motion. His back foot pushed off the ground, his front foot planted itself firmly on the ground, his entire body leaned into the strike and the stick snapped in half from the force. Midoriya swung all the way through and watched the upper half of the branch tumble gaily through the air before comically landing in the pond with a slight plop, barely even creating a splash. Midoriya stared at the few ripples in the pond for a moment before panning to the snap stick in his hand as something welled up inside him. It started just as a gentle shaking, then grew into a shudder as his expression changed. PFFFT. Midoriya shook his head, snickering, then laughed as he held up the snapped twig, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Fun. Not just a little laugh here or there, not just happiness, just some plain old stupid fun at something equally stupid. Midoriya took one last look at the broken stick, still laughing a bit at nothing in particular before he tossed the stick into the air, taking a single step back before punting it right out of the air and launching it across the park. He watched it sail through the air before crashing into the pond, right after its other half, with a soft smile of his own stuck to his face. He turned back towards the park exit, but the smile stuck with him as he made his way across town with a little spring in his step. That smile would stay with him all the way to his house, throughout dinner, and even to bed. He couldn't quite place his finger on why even when his mother asked. Maybe that was just what happened when you smiled genuinely. These fools don't understand what they're meddling with. I warned. Think the mummy's gonna grab him? I hope so. He's been talking forever, that'd shut him up. Izuku. What, you thought it too? Maybe, but still. Izuku and his mother were sat on their couch, both staring at the television as an old horror flick played. They would have gone outside for their Sunday mother-son bonding, but once the heat index passed 38 Celsius or 100 Fahrenheit, their couch looked just the slightest bit comfier. Now they both laid back in some older baggier clothes with all the fans turned on and the windows shut tight, making fun of whatever movie got played on the television, pitting this old Egyptian baloney as their latest target. The effects were dated to be 2050s at best. A cheesy amount of digital remastering and body editing lifted straight from the Marvel era of films. Good at the time, but easy to spot and used everywhere nowadays. Worse, it was rarely used well, although in this case it made the mess of a movie more fun to watch. It had turned a horror movie into something of a comedy as Izuku and Inko sat back and heckled the hell out of a 100-year-old movie. Probably helped that they were watching it in the day, with the sun shining right outside so bright it could blind you, but hey, the movie was pretty bad as far as horror went in the first place. They were really entering the third act now with most of the characters already dead, and the ones left were dropping like flies. Midoriya and Inko both placed bets on who'd die next as the film dragged on, and as with most of their competitions, Inko was winning. It wasn't even close by the time the professor bit the dust, and by the time the end credits rolled around, Inko's lead had only gotten wider. How did they manage to kill 30 people and every one of them be so dumb? Izuku complained to their television screen and mostly himself to vent his loss, pointing his chopsticks at the screen accusingly. The only interesting one was the doctors, and I'm pretty sure they ripped that off from Terminator. Yeah, but this movie is pretty old, Inko said with a shrug as she picked up their bowls, then shot Izuku an accusing glance. But where did you see Terminator, young man? MeTube has some clips. It's a pretty famous series after all. Izuku fumbled for a response while Inko's accusing glance turned smug, nodding along with his excuses and grabbing his chopsticks out of his hands. Right. Just make sure you don't watch anything you shouldn't, alright? Inko definitely wasn't buying it, but let him off the hook regardless. Izuku said a small prayer of gratitude in his heart as he pried himself off the couch and helped clean up the living room. Their combined efforts sorted it out quickly. Possibly because there wasn't much of a mess in the first place, but Izuku liked to pretend he had something to do with it. After the movie both moved around the apartment to do their own thing before dinner. Inko went to her room to get some work in and Midoriya stayed in the living room, deciding to flip on the television again and surf the channels for something he hadn't done in a while. He flipped past sports he didn't care about, news about the latest scandal, and the weather channel telling him that it was too damn hot outside, going all the way to the hero channels. The hero channels were a variety of channels. About heroes. The naming department really went all out for them. News, drama, ratings and more all showed up on the hero channels. Even the advertisements had hero stuff in them, and as a kid, Midoriya had loved them. He didn't watch a lot of TV, but when he did, you could bet what section of TV town he stayed in. But it had been a while since he'd actually sat down to see them, and not just because of the vigilante life. Televisions were everywhere, sure, but if he wanted information these days it was better to do it on his computer. He could archive videos, talk on forums, do his own research. Midoriya glanced at his room, thinking about going to it in his computer for a second before his attention shifted back to the television. Sure, it'd be better to do this kind of stuff on his computer, but he kind of wanted to see what kind of bull the hero channels play these days. And, maybe, he wanted to relive the past. Just a bit, not much. He was just killing a few hours before he went out to dinner anyway, so what did it really matter? Did he really have to make so many excuses just to enjoy himself, or was he going to shut up and do what he really wanted? Izuku thought about it for just a second before his smile broke through and he stood, ducking out of the room quickly to grab a few things. Didn't even take him a whole minute before he came back with a large box filled with old, scuffed journals and a bunch of pencils in tow. He dropped the box beside him on the couch, rummaging through its contents to pull out a few of the journals and a pencil before finally settling in. Izuku opened the oldest journal labeled Hero Note for Future, so old it wasn't even numbered, let alone spelled correctly. He leaned forward, sinking a bit further into the couch as he grabbed the television remote and turned up the volume, his attention and focus turning up with it. He still wasn't entirely sure what he was doing, just as he wasn't entirely sure about this whole relaxing thing, but maybe it didn't matter that he didn't get it. He'd figure out all that relaxing stuff later. Right now, Izuku was going to have some fun. Chapter and notes. Yo, after many edits, rewrites, and chopped content, we got a short chapter with another change in style for me. This chapter used to be a lot longer when I was trying to go into detail about everything, but that style was driving me nuts. Instead I cut back on the details to try and pick up the pace and get some better flow for the upcoming week and the rest of the arc. Let's take this one apart now. First draft of this had a much longer scene with the park and Midoriya was going to eat dinner with Eiko and Mao, but it was just dragging on. I had realized that I had a lot of stuff ahead of me if I tried to go into detail for every day leading up to meeting Nezu and switched my style to try and pick the pace up by cutting out some of the downtime. Now, downtime is very important to a story. Hell, the whole point of this arc is to show that downtime's important, but too much downtime can make a story feel sluggish. You need to give both the characters and readers a break between the action, but if the break's too long it weighs down the story. Hopefully, I'm going to internalize this going forward so my pacing's a bit better. I'm not axing the rest of the training crafting arc or skipping past it, but I am gonna skip through it a bit. Crafting and training are some of my favorite parts of a story so I'm gonna be greedy, but we still need to move on from training to actually doing stuff. Villains won't wait forever, so this story won't either. Now, I'm planning to keep trying out this style of summarizing the action and focusing on the important moments instead of trying to outline it all. This is for a lot of reasons, and the big two are A. I think this pacing will let the plot move faster, getting me out of this hellscape I've put myself in sooner, and B. It spares me from writing so much cringy dialogue. Should be a win for everybody, but let's put it into practice and figure out what works and what doesn't. Give me some feedback about this over the next few chapters to let me know what you think about it. Coming up with stuff for Inko and Izuku to do is pretty fun at least. It's fun writing this summer stuff for me, especially when I've got snow right outside my window. Makes it a little more interesting and challenging to try and put myself into their shoes with stuff like this. I'm also trying to keep it fun but pick up the pace, which isn't a great combo but it's more fun trying to make it work. But I think I've said enough, it's time for me to bail. I've tried to make this not filler the best I can, so I'll work with it more in future chapters, but I don't think putting more stuff into this one will really help it, so it's time to go. Adios amigos. Chapter 177. Chapter Summary. From fun to work, but could the work be fun? IDK, I just started college again and think work is the worst. Don't ask me. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. The club room was pretty quiet Monday morning, save for the slight noise Midoriya made working. He was focusing on his gauntlets again, sneaking in a little more work before class. It was simple stuff since he knew what he wanted, but it still took a while to actually get it done. Grabbing thread and pulling thread over and over, Midoriya was back in the chair with his second gauntlet, slowly pulling it apart piece by piece in the dim morning light. He usually did something like this, working on his equipment or moves before class. Midoriya had a natural tendency to be early, so he had to find ways to pass the time before class started. And what better way to pass the time to kick out some work he was supposed to do? With the end of the week as a deadline, Midoriya wanted to get his suit done quickly. He wouldn't fix it all up for sure, but between his free time and Eiko helping him, he could get some serious work done. Midoriya had started on the gauntlets 2 days ago but never finished disassembling them, but now with a little time before class, he was practically flying through it. The string work was done in 10 minutes, and in just 2 more the entire gauntlet was laying on the desk in pieces. Midoriya even started sketching what the new gauntlets would look like by the time his alarm for class rang. He quickly wrapped up what he had, shoving it quickly into the cabinet as he headed out. Wouldn't want to mess up his attendance in such a nice school, now would he? The classroom barely had any students even 5 minutes before class was supposed to start, but in Ishimi High School, that was the norm. The homeroom teacher, whose name Midoriya still didn't know half a year in, didn't even show up until 10 minutes after the bell for a quick head count before leaving. All of this was the usual in this prestigious school. Midoriya had the schedule down to the exact second the teacher would start lighting his cigarettes because of how predictable it was. Even the fights in the back of the class happened practically every day like clockwork. But today something did change. Usually Midoriya stuck around in class, killing time since he already finished the schoolwork, but today he joined the delinquents and only stuck around for attendance. The teacher came and went with barely any words, only stopping for a quick head count, and with him left most of the class. Most of the students started their day in the right class, it seemed, but since no one was doing any actual work and there was no supervision, almost everybody migrated around the building. The halls were almost always bustling with people walking, talking, and fighting. The inside of the school was pretty close to its own lively neighborhood, in a sense. This was the first time Midoriya had skipped class like this, for some reason. He finished the work ages ago and probably should have started doing this earlier, but there was no time like the present to be a bad student and ditch the classroom for some real work. He just sat in the classroom for 20 minutes to wait for roll call, but once that was over, Revenant joined the crowd out and made his way back to the crafting club room. He'd been back so quickly he almost felt a little silly for packing up, but better safe than sorry. Who knew if some hooligans would look at the empty club room, decide it was a great place for a fight, then find something they shouldn't have just because he was a moron who couldn't put things away. Just like Eiko had when he didn't put his notes away. Midoriya shook off that thinking as he walked back into the club room and tossed those very notes onto the table. His mistake had paid out in the end, somehow, so no point in worrying about what couldn't be changed. Right now he had enough problems to work with anyways. Revenant locked the door up and shut the curtains to make sure no one could see what was going on inside the room, first off. While his last mistake had played out nicely in his favor, Revenant didn't want to rely on luck to make it by. That was why he had hard work instead. Only after everything was secure and shuttered up did Revenant go to the cabinet and pull out the usual boxes, plus one extra bag he'd brought from home. He set the old boxes on the table, opening each to briefly check their contents before directing his attention to the new arrival. It had been sitting in his closet for a while, but in theory, it was their most complete costume right now. He opened it up after just a moment's hesitation, pulling out the contents and holding them up for inspection. First came a sleeveless coat. No quirks, but with the body armor sewn in a multitude of pockets, it still wasn't something to scoff at. A combination of leather, padding, and metal made it pretty heavy without getting in his way. Also, as a bonus, it was the only coat he had that wasn't torn to shreds right now. Onto the table it went. Second came out a humanoid sandbag, or what was left of it. Deku Dummy. Midoriya had made Deku Dummy to practice judo on, but his final use had been against the top 10 heroes as a decoy. Midoriya was a little surprised that so much of the dummy survived, namely, any but most of it had been lost to the Hero Association. He should really get around to fixing Deku Dummy one of these days. But past those things was what he really came for. Midoriya pulled out one of the final things in the bag slowly, making sure nothing snagged on the straps before setting it down on the table. It was too big to be called a gauntlet. Too big, too heavy, and too thick, it was more like a piece of old armor. On the table sat a large metallic arm, built from the same metal muscle as the bodysuit. It covered the hand, the arm, the shoulder, and even some of the body and thick muscles and armor plating. It weighed somewhere around 20 pounds. It didn't have any of the gauntlet's possessed material, meaning it couldn't use the pull quirk, but this big arm piece had a few tricks of its own. It had the bodysuit's possessed material, giving it the quirk's energy absorption, battery, and regeneration. This let it absorb incoming impacts, store the energy, then redirect it defensively to repair any damage that managed to crack through. That wasn't even counting the enhancements it made to strength. The entire bodysuit could act as extra muscle, just one more thing that carried over to this arm. Hell, the bodysuit was so powerful Midoriya couldn't even handle its full power, but this arm piece was built to enhance his strength. With this, he could safely tap into a bit more of that strength, even if he still couldn't use it all yet. He'd have to redesign the bodysuit someday. This one arm's design really proved how far he'd come in crafting from his old days and showed just how shabby his initial pieces were. But he wasn't here for the bodysuit, he was here to get some gauntlets, and this arm piece was critical. He hadn't wanted to earlier, just in case anyone noticed, but... Midoriya finished inspecting the arm and went back to the bag, meeting its icy gaze in the bag. Inside the bag it lay, still smiling. A black orb outlining an eerie white face. It seemed to peer up at him from under sunken eyelids, its jaw forever set in a smile as warm and friendly as hypothermia. Words echoed in his head just staring at it. Midoriya stared at that thing for a minute before moving on and continuing to feel around in the bag, next pulling out part of a pant leg. He had created a special bodysuit, but it wasn't as well made as the arm piece. Maybe he could work with it later, but he wanted. There you are. Midoriya smiled anxiously as he reached under it, pulling out a notebook. Journal number 16, a short title for a book with some big history. This was the journal that he made while making all the stuff in this bag. In it were notes over all the items, how they were made, and its thoughts on how they should be used. Midoriya flipped through the book to check it, then snapped it closed while nodding to himself. It had everything he needed, he could get started on crafting. That bag still had things they could use. They still needed a new mask and that bodysuit was objectively better. There was no harm in using them, at least until they created proper replacements. No, I'm not using that stuff. Midoriya grabbed the bag and zipped it shut, then shoved it back into the cabinet. He did need a mask, but with the quirk it had put in there, he was not going to use that. The bodysuit he could think about later, but that mask. No, I'm not doing that again. Coward. Revenant shook his head and turned back to the table, checking what they had against what they needed before grabbing some leather from the cabinet and closing it up, then heading to the table for some more work. It was time to work on those arms. Chapter and notes. Yo, after such a long wait, a short chapter. Why, IDK, natural talent I guess. I'm blaming school. So I started college again and have actually difficult classes for once, so once again the release schedule's gonna get impacted. Just a heads up. On the other hand, I have an idea of what I want to do going forward and how I want to do it already. The next chapter is already started, the next few chapters are planned, and we're already nearing the conclusion of this little arc. We've got 5 days in universe till meeting Nezu and I'll try to speed through them. Now, let's talk about this chapter. Originally Eiko was supposed to come with Midoriya, but even mentioning her massively threw off the flow. She's still doing the class homework that Midoriya finished up, but hopefully I'll find a way to work that organically into the next chapter instead of chucking it here in the notes. Other than that we're gonna be reviewing the past a bit more. I want to do some more stuff with Ishimi High School, Midoriya's classmates, and the world of vigilantism but we're just gonna try to sneak that in right now. We can focus on that when this arc's over, don't want to make it too cluttered. That's all for now. Thanks for sticking through my disappearing act with the start of school, but there shouldn't be as big a gap as this going forward unless something comes up. Now I gotta scoot though, so thanks again for reading and adios. Chapter 178. Chapter Summary. Midoriya does basic things and dies. Very sad. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Mao's bike was in the same place it was last time they met up, parked outside the mini-golf building. The main man himself was standing inside the main building, enjoying the AC while reading the listed prices. 1,000 yen per game, but a game's only 2 people, so if I bring 3 people goddammit, who wrote this sheet? Was with all dumb math. Mao's head flicked from his phone to the board over and over as he converted yen into a currency he was more comfortable with, all but lost to his surroundings as he counted on phone and finger. Sheet, man, why don't they convert it to dollars? 'Cause we're in Japan. Seriously, who besides you would prefer dollars to yen? Mao's thoughts were interrupted as a small figure came into view, standing beside him under the AC. Midoriya had the common sense to wear lighter clothes, since the last time he went to train with Mao he ended up baking in a hoodie. This time he went in with a t-shirt, baggy shorts, and a couple of bags for later. Me, myself, and I. Boom, that's 3 people right here. Mao laughed as he closed his calculator and took a picture of the prices, then turned and slammed a hand on Midoriya's back, sending the kid stumbling as they began to walk back into the sweltering heat. Now, y'all ready to die again? Midoriya adjusted his grip on his bags as he collected himself, noting the slightly heavier weight this time with the few extra things he added. He kept pace with Mao, smiling as he nodded. Well, only one way to find out. The moment Midoriya and Mao made it back to the underground base Midoriya's training started again, and almost as quickly he started dying again. His schedule began with a nice, slow jog for an hour in circles while Mao set up the targeting range and took the piss out of his running. Midoriya couldn't run the whole time, of course. He had to slow himself to a walk several times to get his breath back, he never came to a full stop, no matter how much his lungs hurt and his legs ached. After that came a brief break, as Mao wasn't a monster. Mao let him rest for a whole 60 seconds before starting the next torture method as charity. The last time Midoriya had come to train he had done way too many push-ups, but now he got to experience a whole new method of suffering. Is this really physical training? Midoriya was slumped forward in a folding chair, shirt off and water bottle in hand as he tried to catch his breath on his small break while Mao explained what was going on. Fuck no, but it's fun. Mao's response was just what Midoriya expected, making the vigilante wonder if he really picked the best teacher for getting fit. Still, if this was going where he thought it was, it could still be pretty helpful. Midoriya and Mao had been training in the same firing range that Mao destroyed with the AEC, with Midoriya running back and forth in the dirt while Mao looked on and heckled. Now, though, the firing range had targets set up just a couple dozen meters downrange and a table set up behind the firing line. Mao had dragged in several cases while Midoriya ran laps, and now, Mao was starting to crack them open. You just got done doing some hard sheet, but I ain't just gonna let ya sit on ya ass. Mao opened the locks on a large black container and flipped the lid, stepping back to look at the goods while lighting a cigarette. And after backquote our last romp, I know just a thing to help ya. Midoriya had to strain a little to see what was in the cases, but it didn't take a genius to guess what they were. Laying in the open box was several disassembled pieces of metal that looked suspiciously like they'd come together to form at least one handgun. Playing with the world's most dangerous jigsaw puzzle. That got a laugh out of Mao, but almost anything would do that. Bullshit. I don't have any bombs this week. Now get your ass over, air, and let's go. Midoriya then spent the next hour learning gun safety, or at least, gun safety according to a gangster who didn't know what the word safety meant. He learned the name of each of the gun parts, how to assemble them, and that the Glock looked more like a stack of Lego bricks than an actual gun. Midoriya did not, however, get to fire anything. Not yet. First came more torture. The push-ups were back. First came push-ups with his arms out really wide, then normal ones, then push-ups with his hands really close. Quick break, then repeat, then a break, then repeat. And he thought sewing his gauntlets had been repetitive. Midoriya was left lying in the dirt, sweating buckets and with arms like limp noodles. The firing range was cool despite the summer heat. The dirt and darkness felt like a piece of heaven to the vigilante as he pulled himself back together. Noise, noise. Mao's accent crunched his words as he flipped Midoriya over so the vigilante was lying face up in the dirt, hands planted on his hips as he smiled down at the exhausted punk. How ya feelin'? Dead. As. Shit. Midoriya took large gulps of air as he stared at the ceiling, slowly coming into focus as he turned slightly to stare at the giant. How many? In da first set. 4 good ones, 7 cheat ones, and you sorta flailed around for a minute. I didn't know ya could do da worm tilde. Man, fuck off, Midoriya said as he spread out on the dirt floor, shaking his head at the smiling jackass standing over him. Still, 40 good push-ups in his first set. Last time he'd done this, he'd only done 27 good push-ups, or whatever Mao considered good. That was a lot of improvement in just one weekend. Did a little rest really help me grow this much? No shit it did. Stop saying it so cryptically, dumbass, it's not that amazing. Mao shook his head at Midoriya and tossed a water bottle at the vigilante, cutting his overthinking short. Ya only jumped so far cause of how fucked up ya were last time. Dis is a lot closer to what ya actual limits are right now, but you still got a loot tilde work to do. Dis she takes time. Mao walked towards the boxes next to the gun table, opening a few as he searched absent-mindedly. Ya sleep, ya food, even ya breaks were all sheet. Now dat ya got some passin', dough. Well, ya seen da results. Mao waved in the general direction of Midoriya, then kept going through the boxes, mumbling. Bullets, bullets. Come on, one of ya aha. Gotcha. Midoriya slowly slumped upward, taking a drink while Mao started to set up, placing 2 objects on the table. Drinking was pretty hard with his arms feeling like melted rubber, but he only accidentally poured half the bottle on himself. That was pretty good. Is that why you told Eiko to spend Saturday with me? Eiko had definitely helped him to relax, she almost forced him to. He couldn't do any of his usual activities with her around, so that left him with nothing to do but relax. See, dear is something in dat thick noggin after all. Mao laughed as he spun a gun on a finger, one of the things he told Midoriya not to do just 30 minutes ago. You need to take breaks, pace yourself. I know ya having fun doing vigilante stuff, but ya can't overdo it. Have fun doing vigilante things. Revenant pulled himself into a proper sitting position now, looking directly at Mao as he closed the water bottle. What the hell was he talking about? Ah, don't pretend ya don't. Mao tossed the gun into the air and caught it on a finger, still keeping it spinning as he reached for a second gun, trying to up the ante. A big part of fighting is the mindset. Mao pressed the gun into his temple as if he was tapping his head with a finger, another thing that Mao had said never to do just 30 minutes ago but who was counting. Ya know the big difference between the good fighters and the great ones. Mao stopped spinning the guns and flicked a set of earmuffs to Midoriya, then punted the table upward. The table and its contents flew upward from the heavy impact, launching magazines and bullets into the air as Midoriya wisely pulled the earmuffs over his head. Hunger. Mao's hands flicked as he swung the 2 pistols through the air, hitting and chambering a magazine in each gun with sheer force and bravado. He flicked the slide catches back on both guns to chamber the rounds as he swung his arms back forward, downrange, and opened fire. The dim firing range was lit with a blaze of gunfire as the main man let loose. His posture leaned slightly forward against the blowback of the guns, his feet planted firmly in the dirt. He didn't blink at all against the muzzle flash as he fired as quickly as he could, staring straight into the targets like a starved wolf. His arms barely moved, resetting their position between every shot as bullets poured out of his guns at an almost inhuman rate. And in just 1.5 seconds, it was over. The table crashed back into the dirt, bouncing once before it fell over while the bullet shells scattered across the ground. Mao flicked his guns up to let the magazines fall out, checking his handiwork with the most professionalism he could muster. 2 clear holes in 2 human-shaped targets downrange, a little right of dead center. Every bullet in the target's heart. The signature of a skilled marksman, backed with years of experience. Yadon just gotta fight, man. Mao nodded at the results, leaning back with his serious expression blossoming into a smile. This was the level he expected of himself. Ya gotta like it. Midoriya got his legs under him as he walked towards the table, pulling the earmuffs down while Mao kicked the table back up. The large man set the guns down gently, then shot Midoriya his signature sharkish grin. Dat hunger is what helps keep ya going, keeps ya sharp. And I know ya got a little hunger in ya. Mao stepped back from the table, facing Midoriya while reaching into one of the boxes, pulling out a magazine and offering it to the aspiring vigilante. Now, let's work on dat appetite. Midoriya looked from the guns on the table to the magazine and Mao's and returned the smile, grabbing one of the guns. Quote. Mao. Revenant held up the mouse-sized gun, shooting the giant a sidelong glance. Mao was over 8 feet tall, with hands bigger than Revenant's head, and so were his guns. The vigilante could barely get his fingers around the damn thing's handle, let alone fire it. You didn't think this through, did you? Sheet. Wait, gimme a sec. Mao completely dropped airs and turned around, rummaging through the boxes again as he tried to find one of his normal-sized pistols. Got one. Wait, still too big. This'll only take a minute or 10. Mao, you dumbass. Midoriya set the gun back on the table as his smile grew, chuckling as he moved around the big guy to give some help. Either way, he was definitely having fun, just not how Mao intended. The two looked through the boxes together before Midoriya's thoughts strayed back to the first time he'd been here, giving him an idea where they could find some guns that were more his size. Quote. Hey, you want to go check out the stuff all for one left in the armory? Fuck yeah, le backquote esco tilde. Chapter and notes. Yo, just phasing through with a quick little chapter to show the final thing that Midoriya's doing in build up to his meeting. Some fun times with Mao and a lot of endurance training, albeit not the most thought out training regimen. Now that we're in the 2nd season, I'm trying to focus on exploring stuff that's already been shown. Last chapter I mentioned stuff like Ishiyama High School, but the obvious example here is Mao. Mao's getting to show a lot more of the stuff he can do than in the first part. I'm not very familiar with guns myself, unfortunately, so I'm probably going to get some things wrong. Feel free to shout them out and I'll try to fix my missteps since most of what I know I learned years ago at scout camp. Lastly, thanks to my friend who came by and helped me edit this chapter. I'm pretty sure that's what these notes are actually for, and I've only used them right 4 times. Least my track record's consistent. Still, that about it. I'm a dip now, so thanks for reading, and adios. Chapter 179. Chapter Summary. The summary chapter I've been trying to write for, like, 7 chapters. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya and Mao easily took an hour just rummaging through all the weapons and war crimes all for one had left in the armory, and that wasn't even counting all the time they spent using them. Midoriya only used pistols for the hour after that, slowly getting to grips with them by practicing on the same targets that Mao had shown off on, and he needed every minute of practice. Mao held back on his own fun to walk the vigilante through how to properly handle and aim a gun, giving plenty of advice and tips until Midoriya's hits finally became consistent. Midoriya had used guns before, sure, but his aim had always been a bit of a crapshoot. His usual pistols created large air blasts, making it easy to score hits and having no fall off, so any experience with them barely counted. He had used real guns before, like in his fight the female Nomu and Al for one, but he hadn't managed to put a single bullet exactly where he wanted. Now, while his shots still weren't hitting exactly where he wanted, they were at least hitting in the same place over and over within the same 7 inches. On a human-sized target, 20 meters away. He'd take that. Not as easy as it looks. Midoriya lowered his gun and stepped back, checking his last shots before putting his gun down on the table. His arms were so sore that even his consistency, the only thing he'd been doing well, was starting to waver. He was done for the day. Course not, dipshit. It takes years to get as good as dumb main man. Mao hit himself on the chest as he gloated, grabbing his 100th weird clay frisbee of the day from an almost empty box as he laughed. Getting good at this kind of stuff takes about a month, maybe 2 if you're slow. Bind back quote great at it, dough. Mao's arm snapped back as he launched the weird disc into the air, then he suddenly jutted back, putting the butt of the gun into his shoulder while raising the gun higher and higher. Bang. Tish tilde. Dachi takes fukin forever, man. Mao's Japanese continued to deteriorate as he got more and more excited, raising his gun to the air while he admired his handiwork, easily shooting the weird frisbee out of the air in a moment's notice. Boo tilde. Everyone's gotta start sometime. Midoriya nodded along, stepping back from the firing line to stretch. He could already tell he'd be going to bed early tonight, but he had a few things he wanted to knock out before then. I was still gonna say but ya extra terrible with guns, since ya shot me when we first met but ya still can't aim for shit, but dat too. Mao dropped the magazine, checking his gun before setting it down on the table and turning to laugh some more at Midoriya. At the rate ya going, it might even take ya 2-4 of us to get even good at this. Why bother with crime when you're such a comedian? Midoriya rolled his eyes but couldn't help smirking, walking to go and get his bags. Mao was wrapping up too, so it was obvious they were going to leave soon, but Midoriya had that business to finish first. Comedy's good, but crime's got the dough. Ya know what I'm saying backquote. Mao turned back to the table, quickly disassembling the guns and fitting them back into their containers. Dat dinner ain't gonna pay for itself. You wanna go to the same place as last time? Midoriya switched shirts and looked through his bags, making sure he had all the stuff. He had to swing by his house to pick up some things he'd left accidentally before meeting up with Mao, but it looked like his double-checking paid off. He had all he needed now, except a little help from Mao. Damn right, dat place is da fucking backquote tops. Mao closed the cases up and looked across the boxes in the firing range, trying to decide what to put back into the armory and what could stay out. It was best for maintenance and security to not leave things out, but Mao would probably be coming back later, so. Then before we head off, how about we get started on more thing? Revenant brought his bags over to the table and the gauntlets and boots were pretty similar in process, so I only had to explain one, but that'd seem boring. Instead, I wanted to explain the creation process in bursts across the items because I'ma be honest, not really sure why, it just made more sense in my head that way. For an example of what I'm talking about, Midoriya and Eiko drew plans and researched for the boots, something Midoriya does with every item he makes but we don't show. For example, for the gauntlets he used his old gauntlets, the old arm he made, and his notes to create new arm pieces that we'll see next chapter. Then as another example, we see that Midoriya built multiple different prototypes to experiment with his gauntlets so he could try variations of the same item and pick which one likes the best. Midoriya also does this with every clothing item, first making it out of normal leather to try it out and only creating a finished product once he finds a design he likes IRL. We then briefly mention that Midoriya did a similar thing with the boots and move on because we already explained what that was when we were making the arm pieces. It's this fun little shortcut that makes writing it a little more fun, I think. It saves me from having to repeat myself and fleshes out Midoriya's process, which is fun for me to write. All in all, this was a pretty fun chapter to write, which I guess is why it came out so quickly. Thanks for sticking around even if this was kind of boring and long, but this arc's about to reach its conclusion. See ya next time for a fun time with Nezu, and until then, adios. Chapter 180, Reflections. Chapter Summary. A casual trip to UA with nothing to worry about, which only makes Midoriya worry even more. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Even with his plans, with all the work he set out to do, Saturday seemed to come too quickly to Midoriya. He had planned all his work to the last minute, but he still had work left undone despite his best efforts. It seemed he was doomed to have every plan he ever made fail at the last second. Midoriya looked over his equipment one last time, sighing as he thought about the minor adjustments he missed. Refitting the belts, staining some of the leather pieces. None of it really mattered, but it still bothered him. He zipped the duffel bag shut and shouldered it, leaving his room and making a beeline for his shoes. He wanted to get to UA bright and early, but he'd have to get changed somewhere on the way. He'd take a detour through the slums for that, then go straight for UA and try to get this done as quickly as possible. Nezu had called him to UA for something, and Midoriya had a few ideas of what it could be. He was a vigilante, or in the eyes of the law, a villain with a stupid name. Vigilantism was just another crime to most heroes, and vigilantes weren't treated much better than the average criminal. Top that with all the things he'd stolen throughout the year. Ronin had been to UA before, but he had the cover of a secret identity and a magic bullshit sword. Nezu didn't know who he really was under the mask, and even if he did, Yamato was so busted nobody could touch him. Well, he thought nobody could touch him. UA's summer camp taught him that was just wishful thinking. Now, though, Nezu had directly contacted Midoriya before and made it very clear he knew who Midoriya was. And Yamato. Well, these thoughts were playing like a record as broken as Yamato itself. They came up a lot, even if he pushed them from his head while he worked. Now that Midoriya had to go to UA, though, they were a lot harder to shake. These worries needed answers, but he couldn't think of any. What could Nezu want? When did Nezu find out? Why now? He'd been cocky. Revenant TSKED as he fumbled with his shoes. His first mistake had been ever getting involved with UA. He would have been fine if he just stayed away. Yue had just been nothing but trouble every time he got stuck with them. From the first time when he went to watch All Might teach and instead got pulled into a strange campus invasion, to the summer camp that almost killed him, things could only go wrong when Ronin met Yue. Izuku, are you alright? Midoriya was snapped out of his thoughts by a gentle voice. Standing in the entrance hall just behind him was his mother, looking at him with a worried expression. Inko Midoriya. He'd barely thought about the impact his second life would have on her until it was too late. She was, to be blunt, the biggest weakness of Izuku Midoriya. Ronin could move on, live completely off his vigilante work, but Izuku and Inko would always be tied together. What would happen to her if his identity was exposed? Mom. He glanced back while giving his best smile to try and cool both of their nerves while he spoke. Yeah, I'm doing fine. Something wrong? I'm not sure, his mother said as she walked down the hall and sat next to him. She rubbed his back and locked eyes with him, filling him with as much dread as Nezu did as he tried to hold up his facade. I just heard someone mumbling his heart out and came to check. You got something big going on. She saw through him like glass. She never mentioned anything about his vigilante life, but there was no doubt in Revenant's mind she noticed something at least. There were small mentions like this that always took him off his guard, the moments where he remembered that his secret was never that well kept in the first place. What gave it away? Revenant asked, adjusting the grip on his duffel bag for reassurance. The solidity of the bag gave him comfort like the facts he hid behind, now that he had to confront so many things that he didn't like. Well, besides the mumbling. Inko tapped her chin, seeming to think for just a moment before pointing towards his feet in an almost playful Monero. Most people put the left shoe on their left foot, Izuku. Oh, oops. Izuku quickly began to undo the mess of a knot he absent-mindedly made, trying to get his foot unstuck from his shoe ASAP. His mother stayed beside him, resting her head in her hands as she sat beside him with a small smile and began reminiscing. You know, your father would do the same thing when he had problems at work. He did. Izuku's ears perked at that. His dad hadn't been home for more than a week in years, so he didn't get to interact with him much. Their relationship wasn't so much strained as it was barely existent. Hell, Izuku had a better and more firm relationship with All For One, the closest thing to a real-life devil, than his dad. He loved his dad, Izuku and Inko both did, but they didn't talk about him much. It felt weird too, since it wasn't like he was dead or they were divorced, he just made way more money in America. He paid for their apartment, their utilities, and all of Izuku's schooling up to college and he hadn't even gone there yet. His mother only did some light work as a way to earn some spare money and to kill time, since Izuku spent most of his time outside the apartment these days. So Izuku was a little interested to see where his mother's story was going, plus, every second he listened to it was a second he spent not going to UA, so that was a double positive. Yup. His mother nodded, smiling a little wider at the memory. She ran a hand through Izuku's hair, her voice still carrying that slight teasing tone. He had a lot on his mind and he took his work pretty seriously, way too seriously, like a certain someone Tilda. Bakugo, Izuku said with 100% confidence, taking his mother completely off guard and getting a genuine laugh. Maybe, Izuku, may Tilda be. She leaned back, gently pushing some hair out of her face as they both snickered for a minute. It felt nice to laugh. Quote. I once asked him what he did when he was dealing with those tough decisions. His mother closed her eyes as she reflected back on the past, letting the room become silent. The silence stretched out as Izuku realized she was waiting for him. She'd been doing most of the talking anyway, he definitely should contribute a little more to this conversation. So, what did he say? Inko's smile grew once again as she replayed the memory through her head. When the job gets hard. That's a tough question. Hasashi Midoriya had stroked his chin, deep in thought. But I do have a foolproof strategy. I think about my beautiful wife and stop thinking. Hey, Inko lightly punched her husband in the arm, shaking her head at his antics. Honestly, getting straight answers out of him was like pulling teeth. It was like his job was to confuse people or something. I'm being serious. So am I. Hasashi shielded himself with his arms, chuckling before straightening out his suit. It was a gift from Inko, a custom-tailored suit from a hero named Better Genist. He liked to wear suits like these on important days, and today would be fairly important. He always liked to look professional when he was finishing business. When I have to do something hard, I think about why I'm doing it. Hasashi let some of that professionalism he pretended to have seep into his voice as he untied his left shoe, slipping it off his right foot and putting it on his left correctly. What I get from it, why I wanted to do it, and who I'm doing it for. Like this strange woman who keeps destroying my arm with her left hook Tilda. Mitsuki.